first. Electric vehicles and storage is the first, so I just came out from the public. What is it? MedSys. They're for future items. What would be obvious? Great design. See, Diana, you gave me the answer. So MedSys, which is the modernized, so on like the 10th or 11th, they issue a vision certificate, and then issues. I don't think any. That's what I was gonna say. No, that you guys. Yeah, I don't think I saw them either.
I saw something. It was just
in fact, that was going to be my next priority. That was going to include it. I don't remember seeing it. Recent interest.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. For those in the room, there are two handouts on the podium. One's the agenda, in case you didn't bring a copy with you, and the second is a two-sided excerpt from Comar, which we'll cover later in the agenda and was not pre-circulated. I did not print out the attachments that I sent by email. There were 5 attachments in total, so hopefully you either printed them out or you're okay looking on the screens, because we will be projecting those at the relevant portion of the agenda. Okay, so this is just to start. I just want to make the general reminder for those participating remotely that any questions or comments or feedback can be submitted and responded to in real time to the email address that was posted on the agenda, matthew.goldberg1@maryland.gov. Matt's sitting right next to me. For those in the room, I apologize. I know it's a pain to come up to the microphones, but it's the best that we have to address the audio issues for those listening remotely. So no need to raise your hand. Just please come to the microphone and interrupt me. My kids do. Okay, so review of draft regulations to begin with. I'm going to skip over the introductions. I recognize most everyone in the room, but as a reminder, if you approach the mics, it would be great for both me and the people listening remotely if you identify yourself and your company before you offer a comment. Okay, so we're going to get right into the review of the draft regulations. They were circulated in advance as revised attachment 2, and I'm showing page 1 on the screen. They cover the Instant Connects, seamless moves, and then I had a variety of what I would dub as cleanup items from RM54. Those ranged from corrections of internal citations, like where things were just now referenced incorrectly when we updated. There were some deletions of sections that were no longer relevant after RM54 was adopted. And then there's this outstanding issue that the Commission had ruled on previously, which is a waiver provision for the background checks. And as a reminder, in granting that waiver back in, I want to say April, the work group leader at the time, now Commissioner Linton, had attached to that waiver request draft language that would be, the theory was that it would be adopted the next time that these regs were opened, which is now. Hopefully you had a chance to review the draft that I circulated. There are changes to both the electric and it's my daycare. I'm really sorry. My husband's out of town and it's my daycare, and I just 10 seconds. I'm sorry. Hello. Hi. I'm fine. How are you? Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you, Rebecca. Okay. See you tonight. Okay. One of my twins has a new bump on her forehead. Sorry. I'm really sorry about that. Okay, so as I was saying, there are changes to the electric and the natural gas section of COMAR. However, one key note, and this was noted in the homework assignment, was the new policy of Instant Connects. We received feedback during the last meeting that Instant Connects is not a actionable policy for the natural gas side of things. So that's why in the draft regulations that I circulated, Instant Connects is reflected in the electric only, although Seamless Moves is reflected in both the electric and the natural gas. So before I go through these pages and we can address any questions or comments or feedback that you identified in advance, does anyone have a question or objection to that general statement that I just made, that Instant Connects is not available on the natural gas side? Does anyone want to dispute that or take issue with that? Okay. If you don't get any emails, I'm going to assume that that's accurate. Okay, so, Commissioner Linton, please. We have a guest coming to check on me.
No. I just wanted to stop in. I knew you were leaving today, so I figured I'd stop in and say hi.
Hello.
I haven't had a chance to pop in since I got a little busier. But I hear things are going well. I've been hearing that you've been progressing. Hopefully there'll be some work coming now to me. So I look forward to hearing it, and just wanted to encourage you to keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Some of you have been I got another meeting. Take care.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay. I'm not sure that we have any other guest speakers, but if we do, or if I get another call from daycare, maybe I'll put it on speaker next time. Okay, so what happened last time when we discussed Instant Connects and Seamless Moves was we discussed the need to put it into regulations, and in doing so, my thought was that it made the most sense to put those two Instant Connect and Seamless Moves into the definition section, which apply throughout the that regulation, and then the detail about how a customer would be eligible for those is in a subsequent section. The implementation of those is covered through a separate implementation plan, which was attachment 3, and we'll get to that later. So at the risk of boring you all, I don't want to read through all the changes. They were reflected in underline here. There's some red text that I added in the revised version just so you could clearly see what I had changed when I revised it. But I think the best way maybe to go through this is just page by page, and please approach the microphone if you had a comment or correction or whatever, what have you, to this page. So I'll pause for, can you read it? Should I make it bigger? We're good. Okay, so the change to the definition section was the addition of the Instant Connects and the Seamless Moves, and then I had to change the numbering. Were there any corrections to this? Okay. No emails? No. Okay. Okay. The next one was in the supplier enrollment and drop section. This is where I inserted the language that dealt with the customer eligibility criteria for these two policies. Again, we're in the electric section now. So if you have additions or comments for this section. Hi.
Hi, good afternoon. Tammy Gardner Smecco. I have one comment. Section F, Instant Connects, C.
Okay.
It states that the utility has established a customer choice identification number. We do not have a choice ID. We only have an electric account number.
Okay. By that you mean there's no, that's the electric account number is your utility account number.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. What were we, I think what we were trying to get at here was the idea that it couldn't be for a new residence that didn't yet have a meter like in service. So is there, which the utility, I mean, can I make that more is Christine Montgomery from Just Energy would like to know if utilities have meter numbers, or if I can, what if I change customer choice ID number to just utility account number? Is that workable? No, Brett is saying, I'm going to start calling you out. Brett from First Energy says no.
Yeah, I mean, our utility account number is 12 digits, our customer choice ID is 20 digits.
Okay, 12 versus 20. So how can I capture the sentiment here that Instant Connect is only available if the meter is workable? Bernice McIntyre.
Couldn't you, from WGL Energy, couldn't you use both there? I mean,
And or, okay.
when we read that, we thought it only applied to those utilities that had a customer choice ID, which isn't very broad.
Right, okay, so and or utility account number. Okay. Better?
This is Jake with OPC. I don't want to signal any support for that, but you could say, since it's a utility request, you could say that a utility may limit a Instant Connect to customer accounts for which it has established a customer choice ID number. Because SMECO doesn't use it, but I think that a number of the other utilities do.
Okay. So OPC is suggesting that the whole thing could be reworded to just say that a utility may limit Instant Connects to the customer accounts for which. Okay, so it's just like, so the alternative is a utility may limit. So that's the alternative. Is there a preference? I know that doesn't. You told me limited. Okay. An Instant Connect is only available in
I just wanted to add a comment. Bernice McIntyre, WGL Energy. I don't know why you would want the Instant Connects to only apply to one set of utilities. If the utilities have the capability of doing it, it's just a question of making sure that there's a meter there. Is that correct?
So you're saying the way that it's reworded on the screen is not helpful?
Well, and/or account number is helpful, but I thought someone was suggesting from OPC that it only be for people for utilities that had customer choice ID.
Okay.
I think the suggestion was just that the utilities may get calls from customers, exploratory calls, and they have to set up an account. So I think the utility requirement that there be an actual account established is not an unreasonable one. But the use of the term customer choice identification number means something to PG&E. It doesn't mean anything to SMECO. So if you want to include that language, it seems like it's sort of a utility by utility decision on how they set up customer accounts.
Yeah. This is Brett Young, Potomac Edison. So the issue with this is we don't have the ability for like a new construction where the meter's not set and technically they haven't established service yet. So can we just say something like established utility service versus honing in on customer choice number or utility number? Is that relevant?
Okay. Is that worded correctly for which the utility has established utility service?
That works for PHI, yeah.
With meter service?
Metered service? Utility metered or just metered? just metered. Okay. This is not your last bite at the apple, so if you need to go back and think about the proper language, just so we all know what the intent was. Okay. You remind me to make that change in gas too. Okay, were there any did I make okay, seamless. I don't think that same language was repeated in seamless moves. No, oh, yeah. Okay. Were there any comments on the eligibility criteria for seamless moves? Understanding that comments do not represent endorsement, just comments on implementation of this. Please, Ms. Gardner. Hi.
Tammy Gardner with SMECO. Brett, could I ask you to explain, because I think you gave the explanation of item E last time, which was the overlap of the dates for the move in and move out.
Yeah, and this was a carryover. This is Brett Young, Potomac Edison. This was a carryover from what we implemented in Pennsylvania. I don't believe that we, as the utility, had an issue with it. I think our system allows 90 days in advance move-ins, so 90 days would be our threshold. I think this was more of a supplier provision, not wanting to potentially serve a customer at 2 locations for an extended period of time.
Okay. So, Ms. Gardner, is SMECO preference to remove this provision, or you just had clarification?
No, I just need a clarification because I wasn't clear on who was actually making this recommendation.
Sure.
So, it's a supplier provision?
I think the language was copied from the Pennsylvania implementation plan. So the suppliers asked to retain this. Okay. So we will ask our supplier friends to revisit. Okay. Other comments on seamless move eligibility criteria? Sorry, Diana Burkert.
Just a quick comment on number 2. The suppliers would propose eliminating the language that applies to a customer's request. We would propose just saying that the following criteria shall apply to a seamless move, so that the customer isn't required to make a request that they have a seamless move.
Understood. The idea being that you are subject to the seamless move absent failing one of these criteria.
Correct. Yes.
Comments?
Is that the wrong place? So to go back to this, Bernice McIntyre, WGL Energy. Just back to the instant connects. I don't disagree with the change in C because I know the purpose is to have the meter identified. But then the question arises, what information does the supplier have to get from the utility in order to make that instant connect? I don't know whether it fits in the eligibility section or whether there's a need for another section there.
That may be part of the implementation plan.
Yeah, it may be part of the implementation plan because now that we've removed any, the customer choice or the account number, it's sort of vague.
Understood. Did you get that? Yeah. Okay, Mr. Atkins, please.
I have the wrong glasses on. Can you go back to where you were?
Yeah. Okay, back to seamless moves.
Yeah. enrollment request, when the customer calls in to move, don't we tell the customer at that time that the supplier is going to move with them, and they have the chance to say we don't want it to go to the new address? Isn't that a request from the customer to not do the seamless move?
So I think that's a little bit different than a request for a seamless move. This kind of implies that the customer would have to request a seamless move in order for it to be effectuated.
Okay, okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay.
Okay.
So that wasn't an objection, that was a clarification. Okay, thank you, Mr. Harkins. Please, Mr. Mike.
Mike McShane, Baltimore Gas and Electric. Just for clarification, and we used to have these at BGE in the past, seamless moves. The way they were transacted, those two competing addresses, the old address and the new address, they would be mutually exclusive. So there wouldn't be an overlap. Sometimes the customer's off a day or two in what the move is, but the transaction you're going to get is basically to say from this account number to that account number. So the overlap concern that I heard that suppliers had expressed concern about really shouldn't happen in these transactions, if that makes sense.
Overlapping here, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Correct.
so if that's the case, then we would just be able to delete this section. I mean, okay.
I didn't mean to speak for everybody. I'm just saying the way we had done it in the past and the way we would look to do it here is they would be mutually exclusive.
Thank you, Mr. McShane. Mr. Young?
I'm just trying to see where in the language it states that it needs to be on the same phone call.
Okay, so you're suggesting that an eligibility criterion that is lacking here is that the seamless move has to occur in the context of the same call in which
Yeah,
service.
we don't have the ability for a customer to call in one day, move out at one location, then call another day and move in at another location. We wouldn't have the ability to tie those two activities together. So basically, I thought this was part of this, at least in Pennsylvania. It said that there must be on the same phone call where the customer provides a move-in and a move-out date that didn't have a gap or overlap of 3 days or more.
Oh, okay, so in other words, the first half of E is utility, perhaps a utility requirement, and the second half of E is the supplier. Maybe. Does that make sense? Because what you're suggesting is covered by the first half there, correct?
I'm just making sure that it is,
Yeah.
based on how it's stated, that it needs to be the same phone call or the same
Yeah.
transaction.
Concurrent to the seamless move transaction. I mean, I think we have the objection lodged to the use of request,
And I think, too, I mean,
which
if you
I've
take
used
out
throughout
the...
here.
What was that?
I'm sorry, I use the word request throughout here, so I'm not quite sure how to. Okay, at least one business day. Effective date of the seamless move. Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it is a supplier provision relative to that 3-day overlapping gap, but the longer you extend that period, the more likely there is for customer activity at one of those locations, and that can increase complexity when you're getting drops, changes, different activities on the accounts while they're pending a change to that new location.
Okay, so the deletion of the language could create additional complexities or uncertainties.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, suppliers, I'm going to need you to help me out because in G and A, like I've used the word request a few times here. So like in E, I can change it to transaction, but I see it again in G and H, and I need a verb there.
Could it be in G just at the time of the seamless move? The meter at the customer's premise must be active at the time of the seamless move.
The time the customer notifies the utility.
Time the customer notifies. Yeah, so it's not, I mean, it wouldn't be at the time of the seamless move, it's the time of the contact.
Time the customer contacts the utility.
Yeah, but you're suggesting that the customer's not contacting the utility to get...
No, they have to contact the service.
Right, but...
Contacts the utility regarding a move. I mean, I don't know if you necessarily have to say seamless move at that point, because it's implied that those criteria need to be met in order for a seamless move to happen.
About initiate.
Is initiate equally offensive?
How about initiates a move, not a seamless move?
And then I have to define move, don't I? I mean, is there a reason I can't just say initiates a move? Initiates a seamless move.
Because the customer doesn't.
How about must be active at the time the seamless move is initiated? And just take out customer?
Seamless move.
Would that be? The time the seamless move, would that be when? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the utility would initiate the seamless move at the time the customer calls in, it wouldn't be a day later. It would be after they call in.
Okay, I think I can just delete request and then in H and not lose anything.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. What I just did in E, does that make more sense? Or did people like the transaction language better?
I think you could probably handle it by Bernice McIntyre, WGL.
I'm just going to repeat what everyone says if you don't come to the mic.
Bernice McIntyre, WGL Energy Services. If you just define seamless move without add at the end of it without requiring the customer to revert back to the to SOS or requiring a customer request for the seamless move. It's supposed to be simultaneous with their request for a move if they're already with a supplier. That might, if you define the seamless move as including the fact that the customer does not have to request that their supplier be moved when they move, that might eliminate some of the fuzziness when you're talking about the request, because then it would be just a request for moving, for moving the service. I think that didn't help you.
No, I think that it's already defined that way, right? Like, so it's the ability to do that without interruption and without requiring to revert back to SOS. I understood your comment. I'm just not sure how to clarify that definition further. I
mean, you could add a sentence, the customer does not have to make a specific request that its supplier choice moves with its request for a new location or a new service from the utility. The first sentence does not address the fact of what the customer needs to say to the utility. I think that's what one of my fellow suppliers was trying to raise. We can work on that language and try to work it out and give some suggestions.
Diana Burkhart with Direct Energy. I don't think that changing the definition to add that clarification necessarily means that we don't have to take out the further references to requests made by the customer, though. I think we should still remove those.
both.
Yeah, do both.
But we can make some suggestions.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments on this section?
Bill Wells at BGE. Brett, I just had a question. When a customer calls into you guys, do they actually make the request for a seamless move, or is it automatic? They're just moving?
No, they're providing a move-in date and a move-out date within the same transaction. They're meeting all established criteria behind the scenes.
So if the customer doesn't mention, I want a seamless move, it's done automatically without even. So I think that's the point that we're trying to get at.
Yeah. You're right. Okay, so good clarification that the point that we're trying to get at in the language we're looking for the supplier to suggest to bolster the definition is to make it clear that the customer does not have to reference the term seamless move. It's an automatic process unless one of these eligibility criteria is invalidates that customer from receiving that treatment. So we've suggested, or we've made the changes to remove request from those criteria, and we'll look for a second sentence added to the definition at the suggestion of the suppliers.
This is Brett Young. I think we also said, though, we do communicate at the end of the call with the customer that your supplier will be moving with you to your new location. At that point, which is infrequent, the customer may say, I don't want that to take place, and it wouldn't take place.
Okay, the point is that that the end of the call, the utility does communicate that a seamless move is going to be occurring. So does that point need to be conveyed in the implementation plan? It certainly doesn't need to be put into regs, I wouldn't think. Or
Just that the customer does have the ability to opt out if they want to. Where you're not saying, no, we can't do that, moving your supply.
okay. Okay, so is the suggestion then to add that to the definition? So like there'd be a third sentence that the customer can opt out? No.
I mean, it might be fine in the implementation plan. I just want to make that clear that there is still
an opt-out process.
that exists.
Christina Montgomery, Just Energy. I'm just wondering if the customer calls the utility to go through this process and the customer says, I want to cancel my contract with the supplier, wouldn't the utility then have to send the customer to the supplier to cancel? Or, I mean, how would that work? What would you say to the customer? So then they would cancel their contract with the supplier and potentially be subject to fees if the supplier doesn't know that they're moving? I'm just trying to understand how that would be handled.
So you would just, okay, so they go through this whole, move in, move out, meet all the criteria. There's a prompt that comes up where the rep will let the customer know that your supplier will be moving with you to your new location. Most of the time, that's good to go. We complete the transaction, then that 814 move is sent. In the case that the customer says, I do not want my supplier to move with me to my new location, then we would not process the seamless move. You would then only get a drop at the location you're serving them at as of their move-out date.
And then what transaction is that?
Just the 814
Just a
drop.
normal drop? So that would be,
It could say customer moving or account closed due to move.
would it say that then?
Should still, it's
It'd be your normal move-out language
Move
on
out, okay.
814 drop.
Okay, that's what we wanted to understand. Thank you.
Usage that they did, the ultimate 867 was a final. Yeah. For life.
Come back to that. Okay. Okay, and then in H, that talked about the implementation plans and tariffs. This is the language that we used in RM54, so I simply copy and pasted there and gave 45 days. I think, I copy and pasted directly, but if there's an argument for longer than 45 days, well, let's hear it. Okay. Okay, so that was the bulk of the substantive changes that we experienced. Then the next series of changes, like on this page, we're still in electric. The red text indicates a change. This is a cleanup change from RM54 that was previously missed. It should the enrollment should now be done in conjunction with the enrollment language in that reg, as opposed to what's said there. Okay. The next one, I received these comments from the Commission Staff Council, who indicated that all of these were cleanup items from RM54 and should therefore be non-controversial. So that's how I'm proceeding, but please, tell me if that's an incorrect assumption. Okay, I'm just going to keep going. Okay. Okay, so I made a mistake. Now we're in 2053-0708 supplier contracts. The version that I circulated to you, I deleted both subnumeral, whatever that is, 4 from K and L, and it was pointed out to me that it should have just been deleted from L because the supplier is still required to terminate the contract early. This red is undeleting my proposed deletion. The deletion is only to the customer section in L. Customers, because of RM54, customers are no longer required to provide the duration of notice before cancellation. So hopefully I didn't confuse anyone too much there. So I'm just going to accept those changes because that was my bad. Okay, so the change here is deleting this. Okay. The next changes, these are some internal reference cleanups. They were pointing to the wrong section after RM54. Again, okay. Okay, the language in 2053-0710, this is new language that we discussed previously that makes it clear that if the customer does not pursue seamless moves, they cannot be subjected to a early cancellation fee. Okay, this next series of regulatory changes, this was the second, what I would say, big piece of cleanup from RM54. It was making clear, and my understanding is people agreed at the time that 2053-08, the supplier agent relations was to be applicable to residential residences, and the easiest fix there was to insert a new scope section, which has the like really obnoxious effect of requiring me to renumber the rest of the section. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. Is there a comment on this? I mean, this seemed to be the easiest fix, in my opinion, to make it clear this applied to residential, but I was open to other comments. Okay. So again, like here, it's just renumbering to become O2. Okay, here, in addition to being renumbered O3, this is the insertion of, this is the codification of the waiver that was granted in April. I just literally copy and pasted the language that was attached to the waiver, and I assume that this work group or some iteration of this work group had fully discussed that in RM54 and agreed that this waiver language was workable because the waiver request was presented as a consensus. I need to hear now if this language was not workable. Okay. Okay. The only change here again is renumbering from O3 to O4. Same here, O4 to O5. Same here, O5 to O6. And here, O6 to O7. Okay. So that takes us all the way through the electric side. The gas side is simply a repeat of what we just discussed on the electric side, absent the addition of the instant connect language. So rather than bore you going through these, I'm willing to take the comments that we've already made to the electric side and duplicate them in here and recirculate, unless someone in reviewing this found something different. You can take my word for it that it's the same. Okay. All right, that takes us through this like very boring review of draft regs. Are there any other comments on this revised attachment 2 right now? I'm going to make the changes to the gas side that we discussed here, and we're going to wait for the suppliers to give us that additional language here. So this will be recirculated, hopefully within a week. Okay. All right. Can we move on? Yeah, okay, yes. Okay, I just wanted to spend a few minutes on the implementation, the draft implementation plan. So this is what we worked through last time. The idea being that the implementation that this high-level outline, the implementation plans would be appended to our rulemaking request, so the commission would have it in front of them, and then, after the rulemaking is adopted, utilities would have 45 days to file tariffs and implementation plans that, provide additional detail within this framework. So I just really quickly jotted myself a note here. I'm not sure if we're suggesting that we need to refine bullet point 3 to say that customers may opt out at this stage, or this is just something that's understood. But before we get there, is seamless moves is on page 1 for electric and gas companies, and the only difference between the two are the did I do that right? The 814 EDI and then XML EDI? It doesn't look like it. What did I do wrong, Brett?
Yeah, I'm not going to speak about the gas side.
Okay.
My question was on number 4, and I believe we discussed this last time that I think we were confused as to what was being asked here regarding the summary data or interval data.
Okay.
I mean, that data would not be available at the new location. It would be the previous customer's information. So I'm not sure what this line means in this document.
Okay.
I thought we got rid of it last time, if I remember correctly. But
That whatever data the supplier was getting at the current address, whether it be summary or the hourly interval, they got the same data at the new address. Not a transfer of data, but, so,
I think it was in the same form, right? It was data just in the same form, whether it was.
all right, so this is ringing a bell. I guess if a customer was receiving like summary level usage at their previous location, they would receive summary level usage at their new location. If they were receiving interval language or interval data, same thing, that they'd get that at their new location as well.
Okay.
But I don't believe it to be worded that way today or right now.
Supplier to the customer. Supplier was getting the detailed data versus the summary data.
Yep.
Okay, so the utility will replicate the form of the data.
I think what we said last time, Marissa, was that the supplier will receive customer data in the same format that it received from the previous account. Was it something like that? But I think we switched it to the supplier will receive the data in the same form. We heard something to that effect afterwards. Or the same format.
I'm just Christina Montgomery. I'm just looking up in Pennsylvania. It says the utility will transfer summary data or interval data indicator on a customer's old account to a new account.
I think that works. That works.
Did I do that? I was just missing a word. Did I do that right, Christina? I was just missing a word. Miss Gardner?
Hi, Tammy with SMECO again. SMECO doesn't have an indicator for summary or interval data.
You don't have, how do you know if an account's getting AMI, once it gets the hourly data or summary data? You have AMI meters, right, to go and read that?
Will you have an indicator after AMI is fully deployed, Miss Gardner?
Supplier, the whole reason for the AMI data is the supplier gets to choose whether they want hourly data with the usage at the end of the bill cycle. Currently, they're getting summary data, which is telling them what they're using. But then with AMI data, you have to make the hourly data available if they want it. Right. You wouldn't do that in an automated fashion, so they can be incentives generated.
We have nothing today.
Okay, but SMECO is, what, 80% deployed? So by the time this is adopted, we're 6 months out. So we're 6 months from these regs being effective easily. So based on that, maybe.
I'll have to look into it.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Thoughts on whether this language at the end of 3 is necessary or is it understood? I'm trying to capture the point that was made earlier, which is at the end of the phone call, the message is delivered and a customer can say, whoa, whoa, I don't want that. Is this okay? Okay. On the electric company implementation of seamless moves process, any other comments? Okay, so okay. Any of the gas companies in the room have any other additions to the implementation plan for seamless moves?
Item 7 should say XML.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi, Christine Montgomery. I was just reviewing Pennsylvania again on number 3. This customer may opt out at this stage. And in the implementation plans for Pennsylvania, it says the utility will not ask if the customer wants to keep his or her EGS. Utility will automatically process the seamless move transaction for shopping customers. So I think I have a little heartburn with how that might be interpreted, because the customer obviously has the right to decide if they want to carry their supplier, but that's different from having someone on the utility side say, you can opt out at this time if you don't want to transfer your supplier.
Okay, but the sentence before that says the utility informs the customer. So
Do we need customers may opt out? I mean, the customer can opt out of any contract at any time if the customer chooses to. So do we need that second clarifying sentence?
I suppose we have Montgomery County, no, AG's office. Yeah. Yes, please.
Karen Strawn with the Consumer Protection Division. I think it's important to leave in that they have the right to opt out. It doesn't mean that the utility or the service provider has to state that they may opt out, but I think it's important that it be very clear that they have the right to opt out.
Okay, so would a compromise be that the utility informs, but does not ask? I mean, is that better? I mean, keep in mind that the customer calls, the detailed implementation plans that the utilities file are due within 45 days of adopting these regulations. What the commission would have to review in the context of an AM, I suppose. So I feel like this is not the last bite at the apple.
Diana Burkhart with Direct Energy. Could we say something like the utility must inform the customer that supplier service will move to their new location, but may not obtain affirmative consent to do so? Or but will not ask? Something like that? I mean, is that too prescriptive? I'll just wait right here.
Bill Wellzamp, BGE. I thought we had agreed to something like that in the last couple of meetings, that we would simply state at the end of the conversation that your supply contract will be moving with, or your supplier, whatever language it is, would be moving with you, and that's it. We wouldn't say anything else unless the customer pushed back and said, I don't want that. Then we would, but I thought that we'd already kind of agreed that our script would be.
Yeah, I'm trying to capture that here. I mean,
The AG's office was saying they want something to say that the customer may opt out at that time, but we don't want that to be implied that the
Right, I don't, our script would not, I don't envision our script saying that. I think that would be silent.
Yeah.
I'm not taking a stance as to whether or not the language should be included, but I believe what we had agreed to in practice would be that our statement would just say at the end, your supply contractor, or whatever the word is going to be, your supplier will move with you to your new location.
Yeah.
And if the customer doesn't say anything, that's the end of it. If they say, no, I don't want that,
okay, so in practice, customers may opt out at this stage.
Why don't we say if requested, if the customer requests, they may be opted out, they may opt out at this stage.
If affirmatively requested by the customer may opt out at this
Terry from Washington Gas. Just going along with that, let me put my glasses on so I can read it. I would say, like, if upon notification to the customer to transfer service, the customer may opt out at that point. At that stage. Sorry. So you're notifying them that the contract is being transferred to their new location, and if they come back and say, I don't want that, they have the option to move out or opt out at that point.
Hi, Mike. Please give me a silver bullet.
Oh, I'm going the wrong direction.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Mike McShane, PG&E. I guess there's a little conflict between the statement of saying that the supplier service is going to move to the new location and then 7. So the utility just told them, oh, your supplier is going to move to the new location, and then 7 says the supplier drops the customer.
Okay, so
And I don't have a silver bullet for that.
okay, so and this shouldn't say supplier. Then what you're saying is this should be moved up here and should be changed to utility. Like, in which case the utility.
Christina Montgomery, can we just take the red out and say utility will submit a job request via EDI if the customer does not wish to continue service at new location? Is that good?
It's a lot better.
No, I don't. Well, I don't think the suppliers wanted that option. I think it was going to the utility.
Right.
Okay, so the utility informs the customer at the end of the call that their supply service is moving to their new location, and then the utility will submit the drop request via EDI for electric, via XML for gas, if the customer does not wish to continue service at new location. Are we good?
Hi, Laurel Peltier. Quick question. When a customer calls in for this Seamless Connect, does the utilities representative have any idea what they're on, or like what do they see? They just see you're with WGL gas, WGL electricity, and that's it? I'm just curious how this call would go. So they would say, so your supplier's moving, and then wouldn't that just bring up a ton of questions?
It sounds it sounds like the utilities in Pennsylvania have developed detailed customer call scripts that will be submitted as part of the implementation plans to the commission. So what we're expressing here is some like high-level guidelines for what they've got to do to implement.
I was just thinking, I mean, the way it sounds like it's just going to move, it
Yeah.
just sounds very, that's the way it's going to be. And as a consumer, I wouldn't, it just says your supplier contract will move. Done. There's no, there's,
What would you want it to say?
I would want it to say, that's a good question. Well, I would want there to, the way it sounds, there's no option for me to push back.
Have you signed
Yeah.
a contract with the supplier for a period of time, if you're still within the,
No, not, you don't necessarily, not if you're on variable rates. It could
Yeah.
it could just be,
This is
and
Brett
half
Young.
the time people don't even know what their dates are, so it's just a question. The way it's worded right now, on the phone, I would just say, and maybe in the implementation plans, there needs to be something on the screens, because there is little information about what the supplier stuff is. So you guys have,
So yeah,
Thank
this
you.
is Brett Young, Potomac
Thank
Edison.
you.
So we don't, as a utility, have access to that information. We don't know what contract the customer's on with the supplier. We don't know the duration of the contract. So if you ask that question, it just brings up a bunch of questions that we won't be able to answer. We would ultimately have to revert them back to their supplier. They couldn't complete the move in and move out, and therefore the seamless move wouldn't be a possibility from our perspective.
Okay. Okay. So it sounds like there's that this is something to keep in mind when developing the customer call scripts, but we're okay with the language on the screen.
Christina Montgomery. Number 7, I think there was a little confusion. I think number 7 was supplier will submit a drop request. That's if the supplier does not want to serve the customer at a new location, not if the customer doesn't want to be served at the new location. So I think we still need to keep number 7, but maybe just clarify it. I mean, number 3 is okay as we changed it. That's for a customer not to continue their contract.
I didn't know suppliers ever deny a customer. I'm not sure I understand your
A
point.
customer could move to, say, they're on a rate plan, and the customer moves to a house that's 4 times the size, and they're on a flat rate plan, or there's some other variable in there. There may be a situation where the supplier doesn't want to transfer the contract.
Okay. Oh shit. Okay.
But all of the existing, regulations around notification and things like that would still be in place.
Okay, don't go anywhere because I need you to tell me how you want it reworded. But please, Mr. McShane.
Okay, so now I'm back to the conflict of the utility has told the customer that when you move to this new address, you're going to have supplier service. And now the suppliers are saying, no, not necessarily. So if there's a problem between the customer and the supplier at that point, when the supplier doesn't provide that service, they're coming back to the utility to say, you told us the supplier is going to. So now we're back to, you have the option of, do you want the supplier service or not, I think, and then it's between the supplier and the customer to negotiate something.
So the point is that that negotiation is not part of the utility's implementation plan.
Nor should it be.
So you're saying we don't need to specify that?
I thought that's what I heard the suppliers say earlier, that we would remove 7 so that we didn't get into that type of a discussion. But if there's, now you're saying, well, we reserve the right to look at the contracts if we want to serve them, and they may end up with the utility service at their new location, which is fine. We just need to phrase 3 differently to say, you may have the option of, and then point them back to the supplier. We can't say you will, as this reads, you will have the same, supplier service at the new address.
Well, the supplier, it depends on the contract, right? Whether or not the supplier has the right to drop, and then there will be specific notification requirements within the contract. So your contract could be like, if we, elect to terminate this contract, we will notify you via this. So there would be a process that the supplier has to follow. It's not just like
It doesn't sound very seamless.
dropping customers.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
it doesn't sound seamless at all.
So you're
We were saying there was a
proposing
3-day notification. You could go to the utility service. You'd have 3 days to negotiate or longer. That's fine. But what you asked for was seamless. What you're describing doesn't sound seamless.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time. So So from the supplier perspective, we have to mandate that the customer accepts a seamless move, but we're not mandating that the supplier carry out the seamless move.
I mean, it was included as an exception in Pennsylvania. It wasn't necessarily the norm. But all of the implementation plans include language. If an EGS does not wish to maintain the contract with the moving customer, it will need to submit an 814 EDI draft transaction.
That was included in the utilities implementation plans? I'm just not sure what the utility is implementing there.
So I guess it would be per the terms of the contract, and then we would just remove number 7? Is that what Mike's saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what, I mean, that's certainly what I'm saying, because that number 7, speaks to an action by the supplier, and I'm trying to spell out here actions that the electric and gas companies have to take.
Okay, then we would take this out. Number 7, if we're leaving this to utility actions.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that's fine.
I'd agree with that.
Okay. 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 Oh, okay. Well, so I inadvertently left that in, but there's no instant connects for gas company, so I gotta take that out. Sorry. Sorry if I caused any heartburn over that. So now we're just looking at the implementation plan for instant connects for electric companies. It's 4 steps here.
I would just, I don't know, if this is the implementation plan for the utilities, Bernice McIntyre, WGL Energy Services, I don't know whether or not the utilities would be willing to specify in their implementation plan what kind of data that they would give the supplier, whether it would be the customer choice ID or the account number, because that was, I mean, that was the issue that we had in the earlier provision, just so we would know what we would be getting.
We would spell that out in our implementation plan.
Right, so you might want to just put a placeholder of what information would the utility transfer to the supplier.
But we're not transferring any information to the supplier. We're giving it to the customer.
To the customer, okay. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so do I need something here? That says the utilities will specify the information provided to the customer.
That would be helpful for the suppliers to see in the implementation plans will go with the regulations.
This document will be attached to the regulations. The detailed implementation plans will be filed 45 days after the regulations become effective.
I think it would be helpful. Would it be a problem? Oh. Oh, it is. Is it in there already? I'm looking at it. Is 2 specifying?
Yeah, the step is that the utility provides the customer with this. So I put and or to address the earlier discussion we had that SMECO does not have choice IDs. So I think in the implementation plan, the utility would insert what's applicable to their situation. Okay. Ms. Gardner, please.
Apologize, I have another question.
Please.
Tammy Gardner, SMECO. Item number 2,
Yep.
in the parentheses, utilities will accept supplier enrollment requests on both active and pending accounts, active accounts. Just for clarification, is that sticking to the 3-day rule? that we just implemented with RM54. So I can receive it up to 3 days prior to.
We addressed that language in the previous document we were reviewing.
The regs. Brett, under the eligibility criteria, you think we addressed it?
We said we mentioned 3 days.
Yes. The utility may require a customer to provide at least 3 business days notice. So this is.
So do we need to clarify that here?
I think the regs are controlling.
Okay.
I mean, that's my legal opinion.
Good. I'm good with that.
Okay, thank you. Okay. We are a few minutes ahead of schedule. I'm going to kick us off of this discussion, though, if we're done. Any other comments on the implementation plans?
Does that include the costs?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you. Okay. Before we leave this, we wanted to revisit the cost data. Okay. So it was attached to your email as revised attachment 1. We discussed the data last time verbally, and then the cost data was supplemented to include an estimate from SMECO on here. Since then, I received a request from a stakeholder asking for clarification about what went into those costs, like understanding that they're high-level estimates, but wanting to understand what categories were covered by that. So I received a supplemental response from BGE and PHI. To the extent that SMECO can speak verbally about this, I'll welcome you to the mic, and PE as well. But I think that the stakeholder can correct me if we're not getting to the question, but I think this is responsive, which indicates that these percentages apply to that breakdown. So let me put them side by side so you can see this better. Okay, so in other words, 17% of this 1.4 to 2 million is spent on requirements, which is defined here generally. 17% is spent on design, 58% is spent on build test, and 8% on stabilization. These are BGE's rough estimates, and I believe those apply to seamless moves and instant connects. Okay, so to the extent that PE or SMEGA, I mean, do those categories generally, not the percentages necessarily, but do those categories generally align with what's captured by your estimates? Okay, SMECO, PE, I know.
Yeah, I mean, we broke ours down a little bit different. I believe you got an email from our legal team maybe this morning on it. But I think the way we broke it down was about 50% is, requirements, design, and build. 40% is the IT and business testing, and 10% was the training across the organization related to our costs.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm reviewing the email. I see the answer to the other question, but it's probably just my fault not reading very closely. Okay, so can you say that one more time for me?
Yeah, we broke it down just slightly different. We said that, and if I'm looking at what they did, we could say 50% was requirements, design, and build. About 40% was IT and business testing, and 10% would be training across the organization.
Okay, so, thank you. again, these were high-level estimates that I requested, and they're generally based on the utilities' experience with their affiliates implementing these programs in Pennsylvania, and to the extent that our programs end up different, it could cause these estimates to be different. So I think I've appropriately caveated that. And
I want to say one more thing about that.
Please.
That was our number in Pennsylvania. I'm not sure what it would be.
Oh, okay, it's not scaled to Maryland. But it would go down in Maryland because you're smaller. Okay. Okay. Okay, so, and these are the associated timelines that the utilities projected. So, Mr. Auslander, did you have any questions?
I'm basically just going to repeat what I said last time. Jake Auslander with the Maryland People's Council. In my view, these changes are providing a very minor benefit because of accelerated switching. And we can see from this chart that to implement these seamless moves and instant connects, it's going to cost quite a bit of money. I believe that last time it was suggested that the utilities ratepayers would pay these costs, and if that's the case, OPC would certainly object to that. I mean, to the extent that the suppliers or the suppliers' customers who wish to utilize this, I think this is important. I think it would be more appropriate for them to pay these costs, and I'd like to hear what other parties think about that. And anticipating that someone might point out that in the scope of a utilities operations, these are rather small sums of money. I'd just like to point out that these are costs that are going to be on top of ongoing rising costs. There's currently surcharges appearing on customers' bills for various programs and Power Stride. There's higher cost of more expensive cost of service with all the reliability investment, the deployment of smart meters, and then coming down the road, we can see things like cost of implementing community solar, not only through the pilot but as it expands, prepaid service programs, and microgrids and distributed energy resources. So I think we need to remain cognizant that what we're talking about in this room does factor into what ratepayers are ultimately asked to pay. And having said that, I'm not sure that this benefit from these changes warrants this level of spending, at least if the ratepayers are paying for it.
Understood. To the extent that you felt like I suggested residential or ratepayers would be covering this, I don't
believe it was
that.
you. I don't believe it was you.
So, my response would be, and I'm happy to hear from utilities and suppliers, but I don't feel that we've broached yet the topic of cost recovery. So my thinking on this is that the Commission charged us with developing regs to do this, and we're well on our way to doing that. I've collected the cost data. I think it's something that we have to put before the Commission in my report. I don't think it's a decision that it's not in my discretion to withhold the regulations because of this cost data. So what I'm thinking that we would do is, in my report or presentation, we would include, these estimates and the regulations, and to the extent that we can discuss cost recovery in this group and come up with some semblance of a recommendation. I mean, there are different pots of money, right? I mean, we've got some grid modernization funds out there. I think PEPCO, in your most recent rate case, you got some RM54 recovery out of a different fund. I mean, there are a multitude of ways that it could be paid for. I'm not sure that we're going to agree on that here. So one approach could be that we outline those options, and maybe one of the options is that we don't move forward at all because the costs outweigh the benefit. So that's my current thinking, that I would outline those choices, but I just don't feel like it's my place to withhold the regs because of these costs.
I mean, I understand your perspective, but certainly the costs should be a factor in whether these regulations are wise policy or not.
Sure, and it will be put forward before the Commission.
Thank you.
Yep. So I didn't have cost recovery on the agenda today simply because I don't think that we have the time to do that, and we're going to have maybe a few additional policies implemented before we're done. So I am going to respectfully ask that we put aside cost recovery questions until probably the next work group meeting, so we can have that conversation holistically, like for cost recovery of everything that we're going to propose here. So are there any clarifying questions on the costs that have been presented thus far? Anything coming in? Okay. All right. So takeaway is cost recovery is a topic that is coming, not today. All right. The next item on the agenda is the electronic customer account lookup tool. So let me just say at the outset that I have received a lot of feedback that indicates that my proposal discussed during the last work group meeting is not a path forward. So I'm hope you accept that I took us down that rabbit hole in good faith, and we're going to have to change course a little bit beginning with this meeting. So, okay, so we're, this is the handout that was alongside the agenda, and I'm going to put it up on the screen. It's an existing COMAR section that you can look at today. So there's no, I've made no changes to this. This is the language that is in COMAR today, dealing with pre-enrollment. So 2053-03 has two regulations. The first one deals with the supplier customer consent that's needed in order to get pre-enrollment, and then Regulation 2 deals with pre-enrollment information. It has been pointed out to me that the language as it exists today already states that the utility is required to provide the information in Section A through an electronic transaction process approved by the Commission. Clearly, there is not an electronic process approved by the Commission today. We don't have that. But the question that I'm posing to the group is, should we be pursuing, one read of this is that there are no additional regulations to be had here. Rather, this work group should be working on an implementation plan for what this electronic transaction process would look like, understanding that there are certainly costs involved in this, as well as an implementation timeline. So what I and let me back up. When I say there's no regulations to be had, I'm not sure that's entirely true. I mean, clearly there may be some additional customer protections or some tweaks that we want to make to the form of the supplier customer consent that's already codified in Regulation 1. But I'm positing to you that this is water under the bridge, and that maybe we need to start wrapping our heads around crafting what an electronic transaction process approval would look like in the form of a a web-based portal, it could be a secured portal that requires a supplier password. But like what we would need to be thinking about is the type of information required from the supplier and customer to be provided to the utility in order to get the information in 1 through 18. So let me stop there and just hear reactions to what I've just said, which the hypothesis that like this is water under the bridge and we need to be designing a process. Please, Mr. Atkins.
Robbie Atkins, PHI. For letter B, wouldn't the EDI transaction where we generate the pre-enrollment historical usage be electronic, approved by the commission? I mean, that's the way we do it today, which is electronic.
Can you tell me, I'm sorry to make you do this,
That's
can you
okay.
explain what, so EDI, you mean like,
So Supplier will send us, using the account number, a transaction via EDI to request the customer's historical usage or interval usage. And we respond back with all this information on the other side through EDI today, electronically.
okay, and in order to process that EDI transaction, what do you require from the supplier? The utility account number or the choice ID?
Well, the choice ID, for better words.
Choice ID.
Yeah.
For SMECO, that's the account number.
The account number. Okay, thank you. Mr. McShane.
Yeah, on the gas side, there was a lot of discussion around this, and similar to what Robbie said, the information listed here is the information provided today by the gas utilities when we receive a request from a supplier. The request we receive from the supplier is defined in the Maryland gas standards, and it does require either a choice ID or, and sorry to keep going on about this, a customer name and address. And that's the request. That's how we know who the customer is, what the information that they're looking for, and we provide the information stated here in the pre-enrollment response.
In the 814, or the XML?
XML.
XML, okay, so,
Yeah, so both the request from the supplier is an XML standard request, and it can have just the choice ID pretty much, or the customer name and address, and
so you're saying,
Or, yeah. Yes.
It's either the customer name and address or the choice ID number.
correct. If
either of those are wrong, do you receive a smart response? Do they receive
That's
a
what I was
smart
going to say. So if they're going to use the name and address, it's important, and we have folks that actively use this, so they understand it. They leave that account number, choice ID field blank, null, no value, and then automatically the name and address is validated against the list of customers that are active with BG&E, and once that hits, they get this information in response. If they put a name and address in there, but they had the account number, we're going to go to the account number or choice ID, and if that choice ID doesn't match, as far as we're concerned, that's not the customer, and again, they'll get a rejection response for that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Bill Welzant, BGE. What Mike just described is accurate for gas. For electric, it's a little bit different. In addition to the EDI transaction that Robbie just went through, we have our CD web portal that currently requires the choice ID be submitted, and then all of the elements listed there are returned.
Could your CD web portal be revised to, instead of requiring the choice ID number, could you require some other information? I mean, I think what's going on here is that they want the choice ID number.
We're currently looking at having the ability to just similar to what gas does, return that using the name and address. We're currently working on that at BGE.
Okay, I understand generally what's going on today. Now, can we take a step sideways and talk through whether all the utilities, assuming, just assume for a second cost recovery, and you get the adequate amount of time. Assuming those two things, is there a utility objection? Like, is there a reason why we couldn't all develop something like the CD web portal on electric and gas, so that you could insert the name and address and get in return, at a minimum, the choice ID or account number? So it's a true lookup tool where it's an account number. So in other words, folks, this is a step removed from the concept of wallet enrollment. Like, we're not getting rid of choice ID numbers, but we're facilitating a real-time electronic access to a customer choice ID number. What would that take?
Hi, Sylvia Welch from SMECO. We don't currently have that capability, but looking ahead, I mean, I just see we have security concerns. We secure our customer account numbers and customer information at all costs. So obviously, if BG&E's done it, then it can be done. But I just have concerns about security of our customer data, as well as costs involved with implementing that.
Thank you. Mr. Wellsing, can you come back? Can you speak any further to the CD web portal? Like, is that the thing that if you're a BGE customer, you log in and you can see all your stuff, or it's just
no. The CD web was, as I understand it, was developed as a means for suppliers in the beginning. As I understand it, for suppliers to get pre-enrollment data. So if they're looking not typically at residential customers, but more commercial customers, they may want to see what the load shapes are, and see what kind of product they can offer the customer based on their load shape, their demands, their usage, historical usage for the last 12 months.
Is it secure? Like what? Is it a secured portal? Like, who logs into that? The customer or the supplier?
Suppliers. We also have opened it up to other third parties that are brokers, licensed, or at least registered at the commission.
How do they demonstrate customer consent? They fax you over or scan in
No, we do periodic audits.
Okay. Okay. Let me posit a new hypothetical. This is going to be please.
Quick question, Laurel Peltier. So if you only need a name and address off-site and you go into CD web portal, is there, with the suppliers, how do you know that the person who gave this information is the account holder and not a spouse or a kid or just someone who lives there? I don't, just curious about the identification process.
Sure. I'm not going to speak for you, but it looks Section 1 details the type of customer consent that's needed, and I guess if that customer is not the customer of record, it would be a rejection.
Right. And at this point, all we're doing is giving data. I mean, we work to keep our data secure at all costs, but we're not doing an enrollment at this point. So it's just pre-enrollment data.
Right.
But
And that's what this speaks to exactly, is that the customers to consent to get for the supplier to get the pre-enrollment data does not constitute a contract for enrollment, or so the next step of actually enrolling or contracting with the supplier is covered under the other existing regulations that speak to that. Okay, so here is I'm sorry, WGL, you're going to have to remind me of your name. Terry? No.
Yeah, it's Terry. So right now we provide a customer list to the suppliers. I think it just has the address on it. I'm just trying to see what we actually provide.
Yeah, the customer list was my attempt at a compromise that did not go anywhere.
Oh, well, I was going to say if you could add the usage to it, at least they'd have it for pricing there. They should be able to look that up on their own.
Yeah, I think the feedback I received was that the customer list was too imperfect of a solution because of the ability to opt out and refresh and other things.
Well, if they're going to opt out, why would we give them the information real time?
I know.
Just saying.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, let me throw out this new hypothetical. This is going to be for the utilities for next time, and I'll type this up for you. But I think what I'm interested in hearing from the utilities is what it would take to develop a CD web portal-like thing that if you insert the name and address of the customer, it would return the customer account number or choice ID. let's forget all this other functionality, the other data that would be covered in pre-enrollment information, because I think you're meeting the reg by these EDI and XML. So let's just worry about the choice ID or account number. So what would it take cost and time-wise to develop a CD web portal that a supplier could get a password to and could enter the name and address and in return receive a choice ID number or a customer account number?
Hi, Bill Wells, AMP-PGE. The thought just popped in my head. We're talking about data access, for pre-enrollment data, whatever, but the whole first part of this PC44 subgroup was data access. We don't know where things are going to go with that. Are we, it seems like we may be duplicating the effort. If we have a solution that meets the supplier's needs as part of the first part of this work group, that report that was submitted.
Right. So
it just seems to me like we're going down 2 or 3 or 4 different potential avenues.
Yeah, I hear you. I think the data access that I understand to have been covered in phase 1 is, I think, distinct from what we're talking about here, because although I may have confused the issue by bringing up this pre-enrollment information, I think what we're really getting at right now is the supplier's ability to access in real time the customer choice ID number so that they could effectuate the enrollment. So the access to the other data through the regs that were proposed in phase 1, I think, speaks to data of existing customers, allows them to design rates for that. That's my take. I was not given the impression that the phase 1 regs facilitated the lookup of the customer account number. Could be corrected.
It may not.
Yeah.
Hi, Terry with Washington Gas again. So I have some questions around this because it's a good roll-time account number that you're trying to get, but they're not going to have usage for pricing. So are you saying this is in lieu of doing a pre-enrollment, or are they going to turn around and do a pre-enrollment? Because if that's the case, what they're doing up front is no benefit. And it's a waste of money, in my opinion.
Okay, I need the suppliers to help out here. Have I misstated this hypothetical and that the Lookup tool needs to be more than just the choice ID number? What do you want this Lookup tool to return? I thought it was just the choice ID number. Is that wrong?
Diana Burkhart with Direct Energy. At a minimum, I think the choice ID number, right? Because that's what we need to enroll a residential customer. If we're looking at enrolling customers elsewhere than their home, at their front door using their bill, then we need to obtain their choice ID number in order to enroll them at a public place.
Okay, but can you answer the next part of that question, which is, are you going to turn around and do a pre-enrollment transaction?
I guess that Christina Montgomery, I think the challenge is for CD Web, you need an account number to get an account number. So what I mean by that is you need an account number to go get all of this pre-enrollment information, which also includes number 4, an account number. So when we were going down this path originally, the suppliers had proposed a functionality that did not rely on an account number to complete an enrollment. That was the ideal, was to agree on a data set that the customer could provide in any forum. So in a public venue, for example, that would allow us to effectuate an enrollment and to agree on whatever that data set was. In lieu of that, if we are going to continue to rely on the choice ID number to process that transaction, then we're looking for a way where we can obtain that without already having it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so my I understand what we're doing today and why that's troublesome. So the CD web portal in my hypothetical would require only a name and address in order to receive the choice ID number in return. So the question is, and I hear from Diana, that at a minimum what you're looking for in return is the choice ID. My assumption, and I could be wrong, is that the more information that we're requesting in return, like if you want the full suite of pre-enrollment information to be responded to via CD web, I imagine that's going to add time and money and maybe present more security concerns. But let me get corrected by a utility if what I said is not.
I would just concur with that assumption. I mean, there are suppliers out there who do use historical usage to price products and to select products, and that's why in Pennsylvania we can rely on the eligible customer list, which does include that usage information. So the ECL doesn't just have an account number, a name, and address. It also does provide historical usage as well, which is why that is useful in another way for suppliers.
Okay, Ms. Curry.
Curry, representing BGE. This is something we've talked about in the past. In addition to the CD web, we have the IVR functionality where the customer can call up, and there are a couple of identifying or verification, steps they have to go through, and they can get their account or their account number, choice ID for BGE through that as well.
Right. And so this would be it would be electrifying the IVR, electronicifying the IVR is what I'm suggesting.
Okay, yeah, and I was just mentioning that just to show that the existing tools we're working on or that have already been implemented to allow easier access to the customer ID.
Okay. Okay, but I'm still stuck on whether the suppliers. Okay, I need you to help you. So the customer lookup tool, if we do a CD web type thing that requires only the name and address, and in return the supplier gets the customer choice ID number, does that meet your needs? I understand that wall enrollment is ideal, and I mean, I can go through the reasons, again, why I don't think that that's something that we can pursue here. I'm looking. I understand that that is your ideal. What is your next ideal? Your next level is my hypothetical, like your next best thing? An electronic web-based tool that in real time would return the customer choice ID number.
I would say, Christine Montgomery, if you left it at that, that would be the next ideal. An electronic web-based tool that returns a customer's choice ID number. But then when you put it, I guess what we were thinking is if there's functionality through the IVR process for a customer to put in 2 data points and have their choice ID returned to them, is there an electronic way to make that available for a customer to put in 2 data points and have their choice ID returned to them? If that's not an option, is there a way a supplier could do it, or does that have to be behind CD web? We are kind of going down all these iterations of ways to make this happen.
How is what I said different from what you just said? It's a web-based tool that you put in the name and address and you get in return the choice ID.
If it's behind a portal, CD web, then presumably whoever's accessing that would have to be authorized to access it. So we only have a limited number of people within our company that regularly interact with CD web. So I'm just trying to think through how somebody who's conducting the enrollment with the customer, would we then authorize them to be able to access CD web as well? That's what we would have to do if we wanted that person who's in touch with the customer to find the choice ID. I mean, I don't think we want to be in a position to open up CD web to more than just key individuals within the company, and so I'm just trying to think through a process where if we're selling in a retail location on a Saturday, how does that individual, our employee who's doing the selling, get the customer's information to conduct the enrollment? And so what I'm hearing is then that person would have to be able to go into CD Web, put the name and address in to get the choice ID.
Okay, so is my terminology of CD Web the hang up here? Like, all I'm trying to suggest is a web-based tool that you put the name and address in. I mean, it wouldn't be open. I mean, somebody would have to log into it. I mean, the reason that I find it troublesome to get rid of choice IDs and why I think that this commission would ultimately reject that is because choice ID numbers are viewed as a sort of customer protection. So I'm struggling with the concept that it would be just like some web address that anyone could log into, put in someone's name and address, and in return get the thing, especially because you're requiring customer consent. So I do think, in my hypothetical, that there would be some it would be some type of secure website that either the customer would access or the supplier would have a password and be authorized to look. I'll get away from using the word CD Web because maybe I just don't understand like all the other implications of what that tool can
I think that's
provide.
the point of confusion is when you're calling it CD Web, are we working within the existing CD Web or are we talking about some other electronic-based interface? I think that's where the confusion is.
Yeah, okay, so let me revise my hypothetical. I'm talking about an electronic-based interface that's, I mean, it would still, don't get me wrong, require some screen at the front that would require a password to access, but it's an electronic interface whose only functionality is to input the name and address and in return get the choice ID number.
This is Brett Young, Potomac Edison. Christina, I mean, something like Pennsylvania has the account lookup mechanism. We offer that in Pennsylvania where essentially what you're saying, the customer or the supplier would need to sign up with the utility to use the service. It is a secure portal. They would sign in, they would need that information, the customer's name and address, and we would bounce back the 20-digit number. So that seems to be what you're asking.
So the supplier enrolls with the utility, and then they're still presumably required to demonstrate customer consent, like when using the tool.
Yeah, they need to basically say how they determined that that customer was who they were, whether it was their license or what the customer's identification was. Mm-hmm. They also have to say they have a letter of authorization that we could access if needed to audit. We also put a note in our system that that supplier access that customer's account for that number for protection as well. But that tool's only able to be used at like public venues like fairs and different things like that, so it's really restrictive and not overly used per the rules in Pennsylvania.
And I would say I think, that's moving in the right direction, some type of lookup mechanism. I think through the implementation process, we've identified some challenges, utility-specific challenges, and how that was implemented. I think one of the biggest issues is if you don't have an exact match in some utilities, you get no result. And an exact match could mean you typed in street and it's actually ST period. So I think there are definitely some learnings in Pennsylvania, and we would probably want to review the implementation plans and challenges. But if that's the direction we're headed in, I think we can certainly have those conversations.
Okay, so in other words, the implementation challenge is requesting that the utilities secure portal provide a smart response back that indicates why the transaction was rejected. Okay, in which, it looks like we already have, a supplier customer consent, reg to go off of. So now that we've fleshed out that hypothetical some more, well, I'll write it out, but that's what I'm asking of the utilities. It sounds like I'm asking what it would cost and the timeline for you to develop a Pennsylvania-like tool. And let's go ahead and assume that it would have smart response capability, or whatever that's called. Meaning that the bounce backs would indicate the reason for rejection. So I'm not asking for your endorsement of this approach at the utility level or any other stakeholder level. I just want to know what it would cost and the timeline associated with it, assuming a Pennsylvania type implementation. Customer name and address returns the choice ID number. For gas and electric, please. Is that your
Just for clarification, as we work on this, so we currently have the CD web, and for BG&E, both the information that you have up on the screen is provided via that to suppliers, and we have the name and address, or we have the choice ID currently available for gas. You have to submit an XML transaction. As Bill mentioned, the electric similar functionality is being evaluated and worked on. So what the ask is, if I understand it, is that instead of sending an XML transaction, as is currently done for gas, or for electric, instead of submitting an Excel file or a CSV or an XML transaction, the suppliers are asking, and what we're asked to look at developing is just type the information right into the portal. Is that correct?
Correct. So it's a form that they could type in the name and address.
Okay, but and to get back to the earlier comments about Pennsylvania, I do think for purposes of protection for the data, it would have to match exactly, not be close, but match exactly. And secondly, today, yes, it is a login ID and a password. And again, if we're going to be able to audit who's going in there and who's making these requests, I think it's important we retain that as well. So however a supplier chooses to request that information, or whether they share that information with other folks, again, I think it's important, and I would think the regulators would expect that the utility be able to audit requests into that system, and I don't see how we're able to do that without the requirement of a login ID and a password.
Understood. And that's what I'm suggesting in your hypothetical, that you return to me the cost and timeline associated with implementing a secure portal. And by secure, I mean a login and ID.
Okay. And as far as the rejections or the smart responses, I don't think that's a big difference than what we do today. So if you submit an XML or a CSV or an Excel, and it doesn't match our records, you do get a response back that says that it failed, and some description.
Say why it failed?
I think there's a high-level description of why it fails. Customer's not active, customer's not a gas customer, an electric customer, there's some type of response. And we can go through that and potentially augment that if necessary.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Let's pursue this route. Ask that of the utilities. We can discuss what regs would be needed and such at the next work group meeting after we get a handle on the costs and timeline and any challenges you identify that would be helpful. Okay. Okay, does anyone else have any other comment on this agenda item before we move on? I think we have a new direction. Mr. Wilson.
Since you just said new direction, I'm sitting here and kind of at a loss to what we should be doing back at our shop with things we are currently working on to move forward with some of the information we held. Everything that we're doing has a cost associated with it. So I just want to be clear. I'm kind of going to pull the rug out on what we're currently doing in hopes that this new process meets the needs.
I'm sorry.
We're currently working on getting the same access as the gas team currently has with the name and address via the CD web to get this data returned. I don't want to have resources continue to work on that if you're telling me that's not what we want. We need a new secure portal, or a secure portal that's going to return the choice ID with whatever elements are determined that they put in. I'm assuming it's going to be name and address. I just, I'm kind of feeling like we're
Getting pulled in different directions.
yeah,
I understand.
we have 3 or 4 different things going on, and I'm just trying to get a feel for what we should be doing going forward. If this is, if what you're asking you feel is strongly going to be the direction we take, then I don't want to have resources working on something else that's going to be of little or no value in the future. If our attention should be pointed in this.
Okay, and the CD web enhancement that you're currently pursuing is like an enhancement that you internally identified?
Currently for electric, you can only get the data returned if you implement the choice ID. In what we had heard in prior PC44 meetings, like of the competitive work group, we were proactively trying to enhance that to include the name and address
as inputs.
As an input instead of the choice ID.
Yeah, so it sounds like you were already pursuing the direction that
Well,
I'm pushing, except that CD web.
Right, but our hope was that would suffice and give them what they need. Now I'm hearing that doesn't do it, that they want something other than the CD web. I don't want to have number one. I don't want to have 3 or 4 different systems out there that we have to maintain on an ongoing basis. You have, as was stated, you have different people that have log-on access to these systems and all of the audits and things that are required to keep those systems secure. And I guess I just want to make sure that BGE and maybe some of the other utilities that are already giving thoughts to how they're going to, based on prior meetings, how they were going to implement some of these things.
Sure.
How
Okay.
we should proceed. It takes several months to get just a simple cost estimate. To go back to our IT department and get a simple cost estimate for something like this can take several months, especially when you realize there are at least 4 other PC44 work groups that are implementing projects as well.
I understand. I guess my, gut reaction is that it does not sound like CD Web satisfies the request that has been posed to us. So I don't have a good handle on what I'm asking in terms of like what it means to ask you to put that work on hold. But it does sound to me like from the discussion we've had today that the concept of providing that functionality through CD Web does not satisfy the request, because CD Web includes access to other components beyond just this simple functionality, and it doesn't sound like the suppliers want to hand out the login to CD Web in the way that they would want to hand out the login to this supplier tool. So I guess my thought is that I appreciate your proactiveness greatly, but I would maybe put that on hold. I mean, I'm not trying to spin my wheels or ask you to spin your wheels, so I don't see the need to pursue anything if we're hearing strongly from the folks that would utilize it that that's not the direction they're interested in. So okay. All right. Okay. Any other comments on that? Okay. Moving on to the next topic, discussion of email notice of change in rates. This was not a discussion point at our last work group meeting. It was discussed 2 work group meetings ago. I'm sorry, let me just find my papers. Okay, so to refresh your memory, 2 meetings ago we discussed that the commission received a letter from Annapolis that requested we look into the methods used by suppliers to provide customers notice of upcoming variable rate changes. And specifically, the request was whether the enhancements adopted as part of Rulemaking 54 could be further supplemented. So the regulation adopted in RM 54 on the electricity and natural gas side codified new language that spoke to the need to make a customer's rate available at least 12 days prior to the close of the customer's billing record or period, and required the supplier to provide written directions on how to access the rate at the time of contracting, in the summary, any other notice upon request, or if the rate, the way the rate was accessed changed in the future. So how that is different from what is being requested today, as I understand it, is the idea that in addition to that, suppliers would need to provide email notice to customers that have email or provided their email. They would have to provide them a proactive email push every time the variable rate was going to change. I asked generally for examples about how the suppliers are complying with the regs as they exist today, and in response, I got some examples across the board, and they do all, conform to the examples. I would say conform to the regulations as written. Examples being that notice is provided up to 30 days prior to any change in variable rate price. They have directions to where on the supplier's website the pricing information is included, and such as like the variable rates. And there's a toll-free phone number that customers, this is the key, it has to be a customer, current customer can access this toll-free phone number to obtain variable pricing information. And in each of those examples, the variable rate is available at least 12 days prior to the effective date. So I think what's before us is whether this work group is going to enhance the regulations developed in RM 54, like what the downsides to doing that are, like what the whether there's been a showing that the current regs are not enough. I think the discussion has been put before us as to whether we're going to enhance the regs in this work group. I know that certain parties, well, probably all parties involved in RM 54 would describe it as a settlement process where everybody lost a little bit. From that perspective, especially being at a disadvantage of having not been involved directly in that work group, I will say that I'm where I say a little uncomfortable disturbing what would be described as a settlement there. And I do understand that customer complaints about how this reg is being implemented could follow the normal OER process. So I'm struggling with where we go next with those two pieces in mind. I have a feeling stakeholders in the room have strong opinions on this. So I'm looking for, some, additional input beyond what I've just said and what's been said in the past. And ultimately, I'm going to have to make a decision as the work group leader whether we have enough consensus to move forward with including this. I don't know why I said enough consensus. I mean, I need some. I need a. Okay, can I? I'll turn the floor over. I'm sorry. That we have 30 minutes for this item. Hi.
Hi, Laurel Pelletier. So I'm going to read back what I heard you say. You got your homework back from the suppliers, and you feel that the suppliers are meeting the obligations of RM54.
The examples that were provided to me, keeping in mind that not every supplier participates in this work group, the examples that were provided to me are, in my opinion, compliant with the regs today. I recognize that is, probably a sampling from
the larger ones. So there's about 20 that aren't here that are active in the.
Oh, I recognize there could be. I mean, we have hundreds of suppliers licensed.
I understand that,
yeah.
but that really have more than like 200 people. So people get information when they sign up, and it's on their contract plan summary on how to contact a toll-free number if they're a client for a variable rate. And they keep that toll-free number, and they can call into that toll-free number and get a rate 12 to 30 days, 12 days ahead of time.
That's one example. The other time that information about how to access the rate is provided in a number of situations, one of which is in the contract summary upon request. That's directions on how to access the rate. The rate is available 12 days before it changes in whatever media that supplier has indicated it provides. So one of those examples is a toll-free number, another is a supplier website, another is written notice or via email. So the suppliers are effectuating it in different manners.
I would like to suggest that this work group, one of the purposes of this work group was to look at consumer protections and consumer things that would make life easier for suppliers and consumers. And we've spent 4 months and probably 25 hours on 3 projects that are going to make it easier for suppliers to get 3 days of revenue, have customers move and not have to remarket to them and go when they move homes or businesses or something, and potentially get information about a customer's account off-site, so it's a lot easier to sell an account to somebody. And then when it comes to a variable rate, which data suggests there are a fair number of Marylanders on variable rates, that a customer has to go to pretty extensive lengths to continually call to find a variable rate. So I feel as if the customer is not getting information that would help them budget. There's no caps on variable rates. There's no regulation. They can charge suppliers, not all of them can charge whatever they want, and it's up to the consumer to build into their busy lives to stay on top of their variable rates, because they can be very attractive and sometimes lower than the SOS rate. So everything we've done has been to make life easier for suppliers. And then the one thing is a simple email to let a busy person know who might be on, say, a 16-cent rate that their rate was going to go to 17 cents. Give them. So I just ask that we remember that there are hundreds of thousands of people on supplier contracts, and some of them are extremely protective and some of them aren't.
I hear you. So I just want to level set and state from the outset that the commission does not have jurisdiction over the commodity price.
I understand that pricing is absolutely. I think the exact words are the PSC is not empowered to regulate pricing.
Yeah, unfortunately. But
And I understand that, but I think that consumers in a busy world on a basic consumer service that every single person needs should have, if they are sitting on variable rates, they should have the courtesy to know that the rates are going to change. Especially, and I think this is fair, I understand RM54 was probably a nightmare, and it really produced some incredible regulations. But from my point of view, if a weather vortex, hot or cold, occurs again, because weather is also a lot hotter now, I don't see any protections under RM54 that would preclude another weather vortex from happening again. And that if potentially people had a heads up what was coming down the pike, if they even noticed the email, if their email is even registered on an EDI database or something, at least they would have the information right now. I'm going to share as a customer and switching around to accounts, I have not been able to get the variable rate.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's fair. I just want to implore, I understand that there aren't a lot of people here talking for the consumer. But I think this is an extremely basic. And why wouldn't you want to share your rate if it's so terrific?
Thank you.
So I really appreciate this, but I think this is an opportunity to make a difference for a lot of Marylanders, and some of them who cannot afford these variable rates and don't even understand that they're on them. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so let me take a step back. I think there's two separate things going on here. There's the question of whether the suppliers en masse are complying with the regulation as written. The statement that I made that the examples I received are in compliance, again, is from active suppliers, and I recognize that there are many others out there. So to the extent that a supplier is not complying, and I would say, Ms. Peltier, that if you were unable to access your variable rate, then your supplier, in my opinion, is not complying with this regulation. So I understand that's not
no, but it's part of the issue, though, is that it's through this entire process for the last year and doing many accounts through the PSC violation system, it's up to the customer to do all the legwork, to find, to call, to find the rate, to file the PSC notification after you've done the week. And I just think we have an opportunity to use available technology on a product that is questionable.
Yeah, I hear you.
So I just think, so you're right, they're two different things. And I'm not sure, and I will take it offline, I just don't know within this entire thing, who's actually doing the auditing? Because I haven't found it so far. It's up to the consumer. And then separately the email thing, so.
Sure.
Thanks.
So let me just wrap up the first part of what's going on. To the extent that a supplier is not complying with the regulation as written, I hear your point that the onus is on the customer. I'd say that I don't find that to be the only, the RM54 gave the director of OER, which I understand is currently vacant because we have a new commissioner, but the director of OER, as well as our staff council, as well as OPC, are all empowered to bring petitions to the commission that these regs are being violated. So to the extent that those three entities could step up enforcement, I I just want to note for the record that the enforcement or compliance with the existing regulation is one problem. The second issue about whether there should be proactive pushes of this information to customers, I think, is a fundamental question as to how this commission or this state views the competitive market vis-a-vis the obligations of the individual consumer. And, my interpretation of the PC44 notice and what we're doing here is, of course, going to be different than every single person's in here.
But I would, and I don't mean to overtalk you, but one of them was to make things more transparent.
Yes.
And I think this falls in there, just given I think what everyone has witnessed, there's just very little transparency around variable rates.
Yeah, and so
you could argue.
I hear your argument. So this is bleeding into the next topic on the agenda somewhat, and I'm certainly not running you away from the microphone if you want to continue engaging. So, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but the transparency to me bleeds into the issues with our website. I understand that our website regarding customer education and supplier offerings leaves a lot to be desired, to severely understate the problem. So I'm just trying to get a grasp as to whether, instead of trying to apply like Band-Aids to pieces, whether like a holistic approach to this would be, with the goal of transparency in mind, would be just like a whole redesign of the website. And that bleeds into, I know we're going to get into a little bit of a straw proposal, and I'm tipping my hat a little bit. I'm just concerned that by putting Band-Aids on aspects of this which get to transparency, that we're removing the incentive for the commission and this work group to approach things comprehensively. So I'm just throwing that out there for food for thought and wondering whether we're getting at the aspect of transparency, which is a laudable goal and one I want to pursue, but I'm wondering if it's better achieved.
I just want to suggest that it would be interesting to do research on Marylanders to ask them, what does the PSC do? Because the PSC website is one tool, and you have to find it, and you have to know about it, and you have to go on the web, and you have to dig, and you also have to go through hundreds of suppliers. I mean, it is not an easy task. So I think at a minimum, like other states, that should be just a beautiful consumer tool to do web shopping. But I still think that when it comes to a basic service, that you've rely on all income levels, forcing somebody to continually go to a website and go down and know exactly where your supplier is and continually look at a variable rate is exactly how we have an overcharge in general and people paying higher rates. Sometimes for similar products. Sometimes people are getting more benefits. So it's what is happening is it's always on the consumer to stay ahead of these things, which can be fairly large charges. So I don't think it's a Band-Aid. I think it's actually brilliant. I would love in my busy life for someone to tell me that my APR and my MasterCard is going to jump a lot. That would be a very, very. Am I going to look at my APR and my mortgage? We don't even do AP. We don't even do adjustable rate mortgages anymore. And here we have an adjustable rate pricing product, and that we're going to have a PSC. And can you imagine how many? Oh, by the way, there's multiple variable rates by supplier. So you would have 80 suppliers, a PSC website that you have to go to, and then find your supplier, and then find your variable rate. I just think I'm arguing that we're in the same spot, and I actually think pushing out variable rates would be brilliant. And personally, I think other states would probably do the same thing because it's a consumer benefit to know. Or maybe you do it like if it's over 5% or over 10%. Give people a heads up proactively. Gas too. I've seen gas rates So I think
Yeah.
So I think the website is one tool that a lot of people don't even know about. I would love to see the traffic on that website.
Mhm.
Now you could argue it's low because the information's kind of outdated, but what about all the people who don't have a web, don't have a computer?
Mhm.
So thank you for considering that, because I personally think the website is an issue that it's regardless of this. That's at a minimum should be beautiful.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't disagree.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay. So I think just I totally hear you. I'm just I need to think through this a little bit, because where I'm stuck is, it seems to me almost a policy question, like a balance for the commission in determining where the line is between the onus on the customer to be responsible for their contract and having to be
I agree. I agree that this is clearly a values question, because I think I've worked with some of the people who wrote the original law, and I know what the intentions were, and it's interesting to see after 19, 20 years how it's played out. And I think that it is a confusing product. It's as you've heard from one of my, I don't think there's enough information on the bills for people to really analyze what's going on. There's a lot of research that people spend very, very little time on this, and on looking at the rates. And so I think deregulated didn't mean that people should, because the intent was that there would be better pricing. And a lot of the marketing is you're overpaying, and then you find out actually there's a lot of people that aren't overpaying. I mean, there are a lot of people that are overpaying, and they don't even know it. They can't read their bill. So it is. It's a big question, and I think this. When I saw this, I was like, "Wow, this is pivotal," because this kind of data is hard to find even in the states like Connecticut, and some of the states that have said, well, Connecticut doesn't even do variable rates, right? That are putting variable rate information out there. It's making it a lot more obtainable, so that when someone says, what is a variable rate, you could find it more easily. So here's a question for you, and this is what I really want Risa to think about. When I look at a contract summary plan, and it says that you have an introduction rate that beats B&G needs, say, by 0.5 cent, and then it says, and a variable rate. As a new customer, when you call into all these suppliers, you can't get a variable rate. Because what they're going to say to you is, how can I give you a variable rate because I don't know what it's going to be? So you can't find historical variable rates. So wouldn't it be interesting to make a consumer decision if you knew what the historical variable rates? Like, what if I knew that a smaller supplier generally charged 12, 13, 14, 15 cents as a variable rate? Then I could make a different decision. That's not how it works right now. People say to me, what's a variable rate? And I said, well, why don't you ask what a variable rate is? And they call in and there's no answer. Sometimes and often it's, well, BG&E is a variable rate too. So this is to me just plain consumer comparison data. Those variable rates should be absolutely easy to find, so that if you want to go get great airline miles or you want to get a Nest, you should be able to find variable rates. I've gone through every supplier on the internet. Maryland, variable rates. There's only a few that even put them on right now. So I can't even find the variable rates. I have to go look on bills. So that's to me what the real issue is that we talk about how this is this really great consumer market, and I can't even, you can't find out what a variable rate is if you want to go do a product. So I kind of think that this needs to really be pushed on, because this is not what the intent was, for people to get 10,000 miles and 3 months later they're on a fairly high variable rate.
I hear you. So let me say this. In the event that we do not move forward with this, let me say that I'll commit to you that at a minimum, my work group leader report will certainly outline that the website redevelopment, is crucial to increasing the transparency, as well as recommending that the enforcement of the existing regulations should be, stepped up. So at a minimum, I would commit to
And I think it's also fair that if a customer is going to have a contract summary plan, which is an excellent document, is that they should be able to find out what does a variable rate mean.
Right, which speaks to customer education and the web.
It can't just be, well, I don't know because it changes. That's why I think having historical variable rate data is very important. I would like to know there are suppliers who have really good variable rates, and there are suppliers who have variable rates that are disgraceful. And there is nothing other than a ignorant customer to blame.
Right. So
I appreciate it, but I mean we've all seen these bills, and they're high income, they're low income, they're small houses, they're big houses, and I'm just surprised that this issue hasn't been pushed. Well, I know OPC has asked multiple times, and I'm just a little surprised. It's like, oops, it's deregulated.
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay,
It's
great.
just I was just led to believe that when this issue was fleshed out in the RM54 work group, that that the settlement posture was to enact these regulations, and I just again I'm just a little reticent to disturb that posture, but
it is worth an interesting audit for a team for a couple weeks to play around with these variable rates and to see how many people are on them, because it's interesting. Now I'm seeing more and more renewal. People are sending me a lot more renewal letters. They're all variable rates. There's only 2 companies that I can see that consistently don't charge variable rates. Now, they tend to charge much higher rates than SOS, but they still at least are fixed rates. And the purpose for this conversation is, do we want to sit during another weather vortex and have the same thing happen again and have Baltimore Sun ride up and have gone through RM54 and have people paying 29 cents again? Is there any protection that's been put in place that wouldn't happen? What if there's some bizarre heat wave? I don't hear any feedback. Wouldn't the exact same thing that happened in January 2014 happen again? Are there any wholesale regulations? Is there anything that's been put in place? Now, I think the purchasing is much better. The suppliers, there's so much that was so tightened up with RM54, but I think it's fair to say there's a 600-pound gorilla in the room that wasn't tightened up. And because nobody will run data like other states do on variable rates and show you how many people are on it, we just don't know how many are on there. So
I hear you. Point well made. Whether we got rid of variable pricing altogether, I think it would require a legislative fix like it did in Connecticut. So, I'm processing everything you're saying. I have to think through whether this is something that could be tackled here in the immediate time, and if so, like what that would look like. Whether it would just be, a policy question posed to the commission because the RM54 took. I read RM54 as having taken a definite position on this issue to some degree, in that it put a lot of notice requirements in there, but it drew a line at
percent.
And it drew a line at getting past just notice requirements and then putting the rest as an onus on the customer. So I'm trying to work within where we are. I hear you. If there's anybody else that wants to speak to this, don't go far because you're up next too on the next item. Is there anyone else that wants to speak to this topic? Mr. Auslander.
Jake Auslander, PC. So I don't know if I should just wait to. But my comment, I think there's a lot that you just discussed, and I understand where you're coming from, but the way I read the scope of the order outlining this, this is a grid modernization proceeding. So, seamless moves and instant connects. To me, it's a stretch that's grid modernization. But we didn't oppose having those topics discussed, because the order says that parties can propose, and that's the way this work group had operated over the summer. As far as the progress of this group, it seems like we're only going to be focusing on these supplier proposed topics, and in which case it would have been helpful to have that made clear at the beginning, because a lot of what we're doing right now we probably could have just been doing in July. But to the extent that this work group is seriously going to consider changes to the retail market that will achieve the results that the Commission stated in its order, which are to make it customer friendly, to make it transparent, then I think all options should be considered. And I was in the RM54 proceeding, and there was something like horse trading, like in a settlement, but it wasn't a settlement. I mean, at the end of the day, the parties still opposed or supported various aspects, and that it went through the regulatory process. It wasn't it wasn't an adjudicatory action. So, to that extent, there's certainly no legal restriction on what we're discussing here. And frankly, as I recall, I think at least Seamless Moves was thrown out at some point during the RM54 process. So, how I've read the Commission's order is, that there are aspects of the market that could be improved, and we want to hear from parties about how to do that. And so, certainly, I don't see how you can approach trying to make markets better without focusing or considering consumer protection.
Yeah, I'm absolutely not suggesting that this is outside of the scope of what we're pursuing here. My comments are questioning and needing to think through whether, a couple of things, like whether this was previously addressed, and I take the points that you've just made and Ms. Peltier made, and thinking through how to pose this to the Commission, and if it were put into the format of a regulation, it'd be another thing added to my report that's not consensus, and that's not that's not a barrier, but I'm being tasked with putting forth something as the work group leader that I think represents the group to the best of my abilities within that context. So I didn't say no. I'm not saying no today to what we're talking about here, the email push. I'm offering those comments. I'm not saying it's outside the scope. And just thinking through transparency as a whole, and whether this constitutes a band-aid, and whether the changes in your straw proposal to the website constitute a band-aid, whether we're shortchanging ourselves by taking the pressure off fixing the website holistically by making these tweaks in the short term. So I'm happy to get into the broader conversation about your web regulations, but I was just previewing my comments there. So. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying no.
And in all due respect, I think, frankly, Seamless Moves, Instant Connects, and this Lookup tool are Band-Aids. I think things like the website and making sure that customers don't get burned in the market and don't come back, such as in the budget billing problem that we addressed, are ways to ensure that there isn't that there isn't a market for unscrupulous suppliers to exploit.
I hear you. Unfortunately, the three things that we spent today talking about, the Lookup tool, the Seamless Moves, and the Instant Connects, were cited in a footnote, and I took this work group as I found it, and
well, when you found it, we were brainstorming ideas. That's how it was being run.
It was presented to me as these three items need to be tackled pursuant to the Commission discretion, Commission order, and I hope I haven't represented a guarantee that these regulations will be adopted. I think they're going to be posed to the Commission in the context of the price and implementation timeline, and it will be their policy judgment whether, in light of that information, it's something that they want to move forward with. But I
guess my problem is that it's being presented as that there's a consensus in this group when I think there might just not be a particular objection with certain assumptions. So with what we were talking about earlier with seamless moves and instant connects, our position is going to be greatly dependent on whether ratepayers are going to pay for it. If they're not going to pay for it, our position is going to be a lot different. We don't even know that, at this point. So, what you had mentioned to me at the last meeting was that you would accept straw proposals, and it would be
we're going to go through them. Yeah,
would be considered by the group, and so I disagree that that things that have been suggested as far as other things that were addressed or in some fashion in RM54 are off the table here, because I just don't think that's the case.
Okay. I if nothing else was clear today, I understand that you don't agree with me. I get it.
And I'm just trying to make sure that that there's not consensus really to the process. I mean, to the extent that these that these regulations are going to be sent to the commission, it's going to appear as if the work group thought this is all we needed to do, and that's not
it will not appear that way. You will see a draft of my report.
I understand. I can comment. When the rulemaking process unfolds, but the way RM54 worked is there was a lot of back and forth about the actual language, and that's where I think the idea that it was sort of like a settlement came into play, because there were so many things being considered that they affected one another, and in that sense, I think it did represent more of a rough consensus than I think this process is. And another point is that I know there are many more voices in this room that are supporting these supplier regs, but they're really just one. There's utilities in this room, there's suppliers, and then there's consumer advocates. So I'm not sure that you could call even these topics that we're considering consensus items just because one segment of the room supports them and had proposed them to the commission. So.
Okay, where to start? I appreciate all of your comments. I do not intend to represent that the pursuit of these regulations were a consensus. The purpose of these work group meetings is to solicit your feedback on the regs as they're written, not accepting or trying to qualify that represents an endorsement by you. My perspective of RM54 and whether it's a settlement and what that means is frankly irrelevant. I think we're facing some practical realities. I have a deadline at the end of this year. I happen to be the chairman's advisor, which means this is not the only thing that I do.
I appreciate that.
So we're just facing some time constraints. I promised that we would review the straw proposals, and right now we're starting to eat into the time that I assigned to that. I hear that there are 3 or 4 separate groups in here. I'm not giving, this isn't, like a voting process where they're assigned 3 votes because, or 4 votes because there's 4 suppliers here, and I'm not doing it that way. Like, this is my responsibility to put forward regulations, and I'm doing it at the best judgment that I have. You are free to comment, and I'm sure you will. And I'm trying to represent to you that to the extent that I don't feel personally capable of putting together a solid plan on the website, and I don't feel capable of including some of the straw proposals that we talked through today, that I'm more than willing to still put that in the report and represent to the commission that those were things that were undertook, and make a recommendation that the commission require that this work group do comprehensive review of that in phase 3, if you will, with specific timelines and deliverables. So to the extent that we're concerned that I'm removing leverage on suppliers by giving them quote unquote what they want if they peace out like after this is done, but I have a phase 3 where I'm doing a website, that's to their detriment, because it's going to be, I assume that the commission would take my recommendation for that timeline and deliverable. So
That's not exactly my point. My point is that I think that this is important, and unless it
Yeah.
gets put into a report, and submitted to the commission as part of this work group, then it's up to me to do something independently, which of course we can do. But I think the nature of the work group was that this was going to be a collaborative give and take, and I'm just a little concerned that it has shifted at some point into something that different than I understood it to be.
I understand. You liked Commissioner Linton's leadership of this group better. I get it.
That's not what I'm saying at all.
Okay. So I think we're going to have to, we're eating into your time to review the straw proposal. So let me put it up on the screen.
Quickly go over.
Give me 1 second to get it up on the screen.
Can I say one thing?
Yes,
I'm really
please.
sorry.
No, please.
Karen Strong with Consumer Protection Division. I'm at a little bit of a loss because I was not part of RM54.
Okay.
And you're asking about comments about it, and I'm not familiar with the regulations or anything. So you're asking for comments about it, and I can't comment at all. I don't know how many people, maybe everyone here was part of it, but you're asking about consumer protection issues related to that, and that's my field, and so I can't comment about it because I don't know what it was about, and I think it might be important to talk about that at some point, if not today.
Sure. I'm sorry. I spoke for a long time. I may have missed that part of what did I ask for?
You mentioned that there were consumer protection issues in the letter from the senators and delegates.
Oh, it was this one. It was a suggestion that specific to the email push. It was a specific suggestion, and it just said that they understood RM54. Did a comprehensive look at consumer protections, but they felt like perhaps this one was missed or needed to be put in. So I didn't mean to imply that I was asking for a comment on past actions. It was just to provide context that the senator, or I believe it was a delegate, understood that commission had just taken action, but they wanted us to consider this even in light of that.
Okay.
Okay. This was circulated as attachment 5. I didn't provide printouts, but it's up on the screen. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Auslander for. You're going to have to tell me when to scroll, but where do you want?
You can. You really can go to the first red line section, because I have essentially summarized why OPC has suggested improvements to the website as an important topic. Over the summer, we put the commission's website up on the screen, and we looked at different aspects of the website that were incorrect. As of July 11th, 2017, the Commission's website was displaying a BG&E SOS price that was 2 years out of date. And the website was discussed in RM54, and a lot of changes were made. And then, at least the SOS part of the website, wasn't updated afterwards. And so, that problem clearly doesn't require COMAR changes. So I do agree with your comments in your email about that. But that was the only problem with the website. Out of the 100 offers that we saw when we ran a search in BG&E's service territory for residential customers, only 24 matched the information that was on the supplier's website. So the incorrect or inaccurate information rate was 76%. 31 offers of the. I'm sorry. 31 offers that these suppliers who were on the website they were posting offers on their webpage, but they weren't. You could not find them on the Commission's webpage. So there were open offers, being extended to customers that weren't reflected on the Commission's webpage as required by the statute. There was also 34 offers that we found by looking at the PSC's list of active suppliers that we did not see on the Commission's webpage that had open offers that weren't posted on the webpage. So when you add all of that up, when a customer who is electing to learn about customer choice and shopping and goes to the Commission's website and clicks on that webpage, what they're presented with is misleading and inaccurate information. If they click on the link, and it's not always to their, it's not always an anti, it's not always against the customer's position. So sometimes the offers on the suppliers' websites were lower than what the Commission's website said, which doesn't make sense. But it's obviously a much more serious problem when the BG SOS price on the Commission's webpage is higher than it actually is, which makes any even accurate offers on the Commission's webpage being offered by suppliers look that much better. And then it's also frustrating, obviously, when a customer sees an offer, has compared various suppliers, and clicks through and sees that the price that they saw is not the price of the current offer. So the regulations that I've proposed would impose additional obligations on suppliers to fulfill their obligations under the statute. So there is a statute that requires the Commission to have a web page, and it says to the extent practicable, the Commission should make available all information about open offers. And then it says in order to ensure that there's accurate information, suppliers shall submit to the Commission at least once a month information and details about their open offers. So this is a regulation that would fulfill that express statutory requirement and at least go some ways to fixing some of the problems that we had presented back in July. I also added a provision there that to the extent that there is a difference between what is displayed on the Commission's webpage and what is displayed on the supplier's webpage, the supplier should be held to the information that is posted on the Commission's webpage. I mean, as I understand the intent behind the webpage is that customers can go to one place where they can be reasonably assured that they're going to get accurate and not misleading information to compare offers and shop. And the Commission's webpage isn't doing that. It's clearly a issue related to a well-functioning market and issues of transparency and that are friendly to customers. So.
Can I ask you a clarifying question?
Sure.
So this does not apply to your new language C because I understand the difference. But my question about adding the language in B and adding all is I had been led to believe that the reason the language was somewhat smushy or vague was the existing language being that they should provide the offers according to instructions provided by the Commission. I was led to believe that it was mushy like that because we didn't that we wanted that the idea was that the work group and the Commission would be able to flesh out these instructions without having the rigidness of having to come back and make changes to the regs. So I'm only asking for your thoughts on whether fleshing out anything further in regs eats into our flexibility of how it's written. Is this an issue that should be addressed by altering the instructions that are provided by the Commission, and we don't need to go through the reg process? Are you following my question?
I think I understand your question is, do we need to make these changes, or can we just send policy guidance or use some other tool? And the answer is that's, I think, undesirable. I mean, there is a provision here that says suppliers, without the red line, suppliers shall submit open offers to the Commission's website according to instructions provided by the Commission, and then this is what we've got. So I think because of the statute, because the statute requires the suppliers to do it, I think something specific in this section that says that not only does the supplier have to transmit that information, but they also have to transmit the information when it changes. Part of the problem with these offers is a lot of them were stale. Some of the offers were by companies that had surrendered their license and were no longer operating in Maryland. In some cases for over a year. So B would put a specific affirmative obligation on suppliers that within 24 hours of changing or creating a new offer to Maryland customers, they have to transmit basic details, the price, and a few other important aspects to the commission. And then if that changes, if they rescind the offer or change an aspect of the offer, they have 24 hours to notify the commission.
So the 24 hours, would you admit that we've given utilities more than 24 hours in certain situations?
So the way I think about it is that maybe some suppliers do just willy-nilly decide, on some morning to change their offer. They haven't put a lot of thought into it. Maybe. I would imagine that there's probably some discussion, some meetings. So it's not as if the supplier is completely unaware that there's going to be a change to the terms. And they're updating their own web page, so it can't be that much of a burden for them to notify the commission as well.
So
within 24 hours of that offer going on.
Is it within 20? Okay, you may have just answered my question. It's within 24 hours of the offer becoming like effect. I'm just not clear what you mean by within 24 hours. Is it the effective date of the offer? Or is it
when a customer can call and enroll in that plan?
So within 24 hours of the offer becoming available.
Yeah, and notice nothing in my regulations dictates or directs or states anything about how the commission will internally, what the commission will do with that information. So it doesn't impose any affirmative obligation on the commission to post it within 24 hours, for example. I mean, as I understand the website, I think that it is streamlined to a certain extent, and the information that comes in comes onto the webpage. But if that's not the case, this isn't saying that the commission has 24 hours.
Would you be amenable to just clarification that within 24 hours of the offer becoming available or being I'm just even if we were going to move forward on this path, I just don't. I think it could be clearer.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's certainly some wordsmithing that can be done. I'm certainly amenable to that.
Okay. So. Again, I just want to be clear. Your position is you don't feel like the addition of the language in B, or even C to mostly B, you don't. I'm worried about us giving away our discretion to be specifying things in these instructions. The more prescriptive we become in regulations.
We're not deleting according to instructions provided by the commission.
Yeah, but you're expounding on it in a way. I mean, this is just like a statutory interpretation
right.
question.
So I think to the extent that 2 years from now in a different proceeding, we're still talking about the website and all these problems are still there. This provision would give the commission the regulatory authority to take an enforcement action for violation of this provision. And this is not a very erroneous burden that I'm asking to be placed on suppliers. I'm just asking if they're posting information on their website, if they're offering products to Maryland customers, to notify the commission as the statute requires.
Okay, thank you. Is there any, before we, I know there are other pages to this draw proposal, but before we move off of this section, is there some reaction to what has been described? Mr. McShane?
Before we move off of it?
Of course.
Because we don't have the same problems on the gas
You
website.
came all the way to the mic and you're not speaking into it.
Yeah. Since we don't have the same problems on the gas website, I will point out the identical COMAR language exists in the same section, 20590707C2.
You're saying we would have the same
I'm saying there's no website as prescribed in 2059-07-07 C2. So for a BG&E customer, if you're shopping, and the point of this is to have a better shopping experience for BGE customers, and you have electricity and you have gas, there isn't anything on a website by the PSC for gas pricing.
Are you suggesting that we add language about a commission website to the gas section?
Well, since it's already identified.
Since we're here.
Yeah, this is an interesting problem that I think I have. It's come up in some way in other workers, but it was not in my mind that BG&E's combined utility service does create some challenges sometimes when it comes to implementing statutes. So the reason that the commission has a website is for to provide the transparency. In BG's case, it's hard. I guess it could be harder to do because of some ambiguity or gaps in the law. So I was trying to suggest things that were I thought were easy fixes and that weren't going to. When I initially presented this to the group over the summer, there wasn't really a lot of pushback. I think there was sort of an acknowledgement that this was a problem that needed to be taken care of. So,
okay. I'm sorry. Did you have another?
No, that was it. I just thought it would be the right time to point out that we have the same COMAR language in the gas regs for a commission website with suppliers providing the same information, but we don't have the website, so there is no pricing available.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so let me ask you a few more clarifying questions. On C, how do you envision, I understand the intent. I'm just thinking like implementation nightmare, like how do we go about verifying that the open offer on the website was different than that
would probably require something on the commission's end, because the commission would be the they would have the records of what was posted on their webpage at on which date.
So, but does the rate not become? I mean, the rate's not binding until the customer enters into the contract. So, like, what we're, is this a roundabout way of just enforcing that the suppliers post accurate offers? Like, doesn't the commission already have like fining authority, or we could, challenge their license if they're not complying? Like, is C just not the right tool?
The commission certainly has authority to enforce it. The suggestions here are to improve the web page so that customers will actually use it. And if customers use it and they click through and they aren't going to get the low price that they saw on the commission's website, then customers won't use it. I don't know how many customers currently use it, but I can't imagine that that any of them would be thrilled at all the extra legwork that they have to do. It ends up, it's a nice list to let you know who, the names of companies that might be offering the product that you want, but as far as the actual prices, it's useless.
Okay, so here's my pushback, and it's not to be there's question in my mind about 24 hours. My pushback on C, and the reason why I characterize this as a band-aid, is my concern is that we would effectuate this type of regulation before taking on a comprehensive redesign of the commission's website. Like, I hate to be pushing the customers in the direction of using our website when we all agree that it's woefully underdeveloped. So is it fair to be is this something that we hold in reserve? Is C something we hold in reserve until the commission's website is better developed? Do you take my point?
So the other problem that you're going to have with enforcing a provision like this is it's always going to be considered de minimis because it's just a mistake, and it probably is a mistake. Certainly, the suppliers that have a better offer than is being posted on the website, I don't see why a rational business would do that. So it is a mistake, but this provides a a extra incentive to the supplier to make sure that the offer that's posted on the commission's website is the one that they intend to impose on customers. Because if a previous lower offer is on the commission's website, then they'll have to honor it.
Okay, Ms. Beldier.
I just want to follow up to a letter that I wrote to you and Obi. Even in its current form, the chart format of the PSC website still works. It just needs to be, even in those boxes, it can still work. And in the way you guys, I mean, you could hire an ad agency right now and have a new website in 3 months. But because of all this we have to go through, I think this is brilliant, because at least it takes this very simple chart and says, please update it. When you launch a new product, you have 48 hours to at least get the information and have it accurate. Even in its current chart format, which is probably going to be there for a bit of time, it still works.
Thank you. I need some reactions from those that would be affected. Okay.
Silence is not support.
Okay. Yeah.
Christina Montgomery, Just Energy. I would just say in general, and I hesitate to say this, but we agree with OPC that there are some changes needed to the website. We were also advocates early on in this process of reviewing the website as part of our work in this working group. So I think we agree this should definitely be looked at. But early on in the process, we did advocate for sort of a comprehensive review of the website, not just one-off changes. And so we certainly anticipate that there would be some challenges if this language were to go into effect as it is currently written. I think we need some time as a group to work through that. But we would support kind of a comprehensive review of the website, not just making individual changes at this point.
Yeah, I actually, that was what we had discussed, and that was OPC's position as well. I prepared this in response to the imposed deadline, but certainly I think it is important to make sure that we all the observations that I made were limited to a search in BG&E service territories. But I don't know how widespread the problem is. There could be suggestions for additional information to be added. I suggested in the narrative section that the Commission's website lists the number of complaints that have been filed against suppliers within a certain period of time, and suppliers aren't in support of that suggestion. My problem with tabling this to like a phase 3 or let's just see in the future is that currently the website is not there's no statute that specifically requires instant connects and seamless moves. There is one that requires the Commission to maintain a website and for suppliers to provide this information. So I would think that there's should be a sense of urgency to the extent that a comprehensive process is going to take place, that it happens sooner rather than later.
Okay, so this may not be well received. What do people think about the possibility of pursuing these changes immediately, but with the understanding that a waiver of would be granted until the comprehensive update was completed and we have a deliverable on that? So then you're not doing a phase, does that make sense?
Well, I mean, it certainly addresses the supplier's interests and sort of responding to draft regulations with very little time. Although I'd say pretty much that's the position I'm in regards to instant connects. The problem with a waiver is that the problem is ongoing right now. So I think it's important just to fix the problem, especially because I don't think it's as complicated a problem as it we might think it is. I mean, it really is. How do we make sure that the information that is being uploaded is accurate, that the price that a supplier is actually marketing to customers on their website or door to door is the one that's on the commission's website.
Yeah, let me push back. I'm not suggesting that, like, I don't think it's exactly that, because my plan would be requiring the suppliers to immediately react to this language. In fact, we would be putting it forth in the rulemaking. The point of my suggestion was my concern about moving forward. My personal concern about moving forward with like C or putting any additional onus on pushing customers to use our website, and I take Ms. Peltier's point about it being usable in the format it is. I just hate as a commission to be pushing customers towards something that we know is broken. So by forcing us to address this language now and getting it right now, but then immediately imposing a waiver for 6 months while we do a comprehensive overhaul of the website, so that when the waiver is lifted, the website's ready and the regs are in place, and it's like an enforcement, like a coinciding of the enforcement of it with the new website being ready. That was my suggestion.
I think that to the extent that there's problems implementing, I'm not sure I understand how we're pushing people to use the website, and by doing nothing, or somehow that helps the problem.
Okay, further reactions? Please, Ms. McIntyre.
I'm not sure that this can be implemented in the Bernice McIntyre WGL Energy Services could be implemented in the time frame that you're talking about, but Pennsylvania's website is a pretty robust website. And I don't know if people, again, we don't have the time to sit down and compare one to the other and see how you might adopt that type of a format. We operate in Pennsylvania, so we are aware of the requirements there, and I think from from both a supplier perspective and I think from a customer perspective, the Pennsylvania one is a more robust model. So that's something to look at. But then again, you'd still have a problem of, I'm not sure it would address some of OPC's issues, but it would strengthen the website.
Thank you. Yeah, so see, I guess now I've had a chance to think, and with Ms. McIntyre's comments, I understand your point that doing nothing isn't great either, but my concern in adopting C without having a new website available is that we start like enforcement power, and we're, we start enforcing C, but like there's not.
So here's how I see it. Here's the benefit of it. It's going to go through the rulemaking process before it becomes. It's arguably arguably a violation of the law to not do it. But assuming right now, I'm just not going to get into that. If you go through a rulemaking process and suppliers see that there's this requirement, the ones that aren't updating the website are going to talk to their website guys and say, each month when you change our website, send it to the commission, right away, because we know this rule is coming. You're going to change our processes so we don't cause a violation. So then even the proposed regulations start to provide a benefit to customers and further the intent of the General Assembly when they pass a statute requiring the commission to operate this website.
Thank you. Okay, other reactions? Okay. Oh, is this is the gas side, is what you're saying? Okay. Okay, I'm cognizant that I think I only have a schedule for 20 more minutes, so let's move to the next proposal, which I believe is on budget billing.
Right. Yeah, I did winnow down. OPC had proposed a number of topics, so I tried to winnow it down to two that I thought were important to address real problems that exist right now, dealing with aspects of the market that are broken, and that could possibly be fixed by changes to COMAR. So, we have become aware of a problem with actually 2 suppliers at this point that are offering a budget billing option to their customers in a way that is detrimental to the customer, because information is not being transmitted to the customer about the amount of whether their budget bill amount is over their actual usage or under their actual usage, and the amount of the arrearage that's building up. They're also not annually. Right now, the utilities, as I understand it, will readjust a budget bill amount quarterly. The COMAR only requires them to do it annually, but they still do it quarterly, and I think sometimes they'll even do it sooner. I mean, the whole point of the budget billing is to try to get that bill, at the actual, average, and not what, not lead to a large, really what, from a customer perspective standpoint, not lead to a large arrearage. And in one particular case, that we're aware of, a supplier, when a customer terminated their contract, had a line item of over $3,000 worth of arrearage charges that had built up on their budget billing account over a period of 3 years. When we reviewed the bills that the customer had received from BG&E, most did not contain any information that would lead the customer to understand that there is a budget billing arrangement going on. Towards the end of the process, when the customer canceled, there was some information, but it did not match the information that the supplier later provided to the customer to show how much he was over or really under paying each month over a period of 3 years. So when we looked at COMAR, what we noticed is that although COMAR does require a utility to allow suppliers to offer a budget billing option if the utility provides a budget billing option, it's silent after that. So what these proposed changes would do is it would require the supplier to more or less do what the utility does. So, to the extent that the intent of allowing budget billing for suppliers in the first place is to put them on an equal playing field with the utility, and not have a situation where the incumbent utility has some kind of built-in advantage, well then basic rules requiring the notice to the customer that the utilities are required to provide should also be imposed. And again, it probably already is imposed under the the supplier's duty to not commit unfair and deceptive trade practices. But assuming that that's not the case, this provision would more clearly explain what suppliers need to have appear on the supplier portion of the customer's bill, so that the customer is aware. Oh wait, I'm building up a big balance here. This commodity price I'm getting sounds too good to be true, because it isn't.
Let me ask you this. So you asserted that the additional language is restatement, in your opinion, of what the utilities are already doing or already required to be doing.
So just to be clear, I actually took there's an equal monthly payment plan section of the USPP regulation. So I just cut and pasted that in, and then changed it where needed to make it apply to suppliers and not utilities and energy assistance benefits.
Okay, so here's my question. Is this the commission has pending before it the separate case of the supplier consolidated billing. Is this something that is more appropriately addressed in that context? And if not, why? So
what is currently pending before the commission is a petition to have a supplier consolidated billing. I don't know if that means that it's certainly going to happen. If it was going to happen, I suppose it could be. Again, we'd run into the problem that I don't think that process would start until maybe second quarter of 2018 at the earliest. And then whenever you start a rulemaking, you have to realize once you're done, you bring something to the commission, you're not done at all, because it has to go through the whole rulemaking. It has to follow the rulemaking requirements of the State's Administrative Procedures Act. So we're talking always about a long, long lag, and that's why I understand that sometimes it's good to make sure that we're being cautious. But these two proposals, I thought on their face were just so sensible. I mean, wording aside, I'm not see. I don't really understand what could be objectionable, about the intent of what I'm trying to accomplish here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I had not put together that this is copy and pasted from the USPP section, but I'll take your word for that. Is there any reactions?
Oh, yes, sorry.
I just thought I think in this process it's great to see support, and I put this on mine too because budget seems to have no definition to some suppliers, and it's completely misused in multiple ways. And so what I had put, which we don't have to talk about, is it needs to be defined. I don't know if it's in these official rules or if it's just some edict that you guys put out. What is budget billing and how does it work and what is it not? And what language gets printed on a bill? Because the stuff I've seen has been nuts, and it's not even budget billing. So I really think this is important. I've seen budget billing being used for true-up. And true-up was one word, and I've seen it used for a minimum, like a minimum payment that customers pay. It had nothing to do with their usage. It was simply minimum. So I think this is important because budget billing is one thing to a utility and a different thing to some suppliers.
Thank you. Ms. Peltier, before you walk away, does the language suggested by OPC, which puts some parameters around what budget billing would constitute for suppliers? I'm a little concerned about defining it for a couple of reasons, but absent defining it, if you spell out the parameters for how it be effectuated, is that accomplishing the same?
I think that's smart. And I think that's smart. Because right now, again, it's falling into the whole category of unregulated, and it's being used in some very misleading ways. The only thing is I think sometimes you have to codify in what is the term that can be used. Because the terms printed on the bills don't work. They don't sometimes match the regulations. So, and that's where I would need guidance on how do you use the rules to make what the customer's getting what they think they're getting. So,
yeah, which was where my question was going a little bit ago about, like, if the commission so chooses to take up supplier consolidated billing, like, is that something that's more appropriately discussed in there? Because what you're talking about, so the bills that are being issued currently are by the utilities. So if the concern is about, like, what the suppliers would be putting on their bills, like that would only come about if the commission approves supplier consolidated billing.
No, it's the bill feeds that are going onto the current utility bills.
Your objection is to the utility bill.
My objection, my hope is that there is parameters put on exact language used that can be printed on a consumer's utility bill when the bill feed comes in from the supplier. Because right now those definitions are so open and they're misrepresented and they're just not used correctly. Budget billing has multiple. It's not budget billing. There is no budget billing. Sometimes it's done correctly. It just the product needs to be defined by the state of Maryland. What is budget billing from a supplier, and what it's not.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Auslander, did we walk through your proposals? There's one on gas side too. Was there?
It's just to impose the same requirements to the extent that a product is being gas supplied.
Understood.
And again, some wordsmithing might need to be done because I know not all utilities call budget billing. They they have different names for it. Even Comar says budget billing in one section, then equal monthly payment plan in another. So there certainly could be some wordsmithing changes, but the intent is that what would appear on a utilities customer bill as budget billing charges for utility charges would be the same for the utility charges, and there wouldn't be a ability of a supplier to technically provide the customer information about their their bill each month, but effectively not, because they're not being clear about an arrearage that's building up.
Okay, so okay, thank you. So we've got 10 minutes, 9 minutes, and I think we've walked through your proposals. I've gotten some initial. I've asked you a whole bunch of questions, and I know we've gotten some initial feedback. I think it's.
Are these questions for me or just for everybody?
I asked you questions about clarification.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just recapping what's happened. So, so I think it's fair that we, now that you've presented this, that we percolate on these and revisit them at the next meeting. So
I appreciate that you have a deadline coming up, and it's not it's not optimal to get something like this 2 months before they're due. But I did keep that in mind when I drafted these and when I winnowed down our list of topics, because I thought that I really picked some low-hanging fruit that would be hard to find objectionable.
Understood. Okay, so let's leave that there absent any clarifying questions for OPC, and understand that we'll revisit this at the next work group meeting. Okay, we've discussed to some extent Ms. Peltier's straw proposal. Oh, shoot. Okay, so okay, we've discussed budget billing. When I read through, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Peltier, but when I read through your comments, they seem to be about the bill, which I'm not as studied on this part of how we effectuate this, but I think, and Ms. Curry, Mr. Michael can correct me if I'm wrong, I think electricity and gas company bills are submitted to the commission and for review, but they're not regulated, right? Help me out here, please.
That is correct. Kim Curry for BGE. There is a provision in Comar that requires us to submit them. We did that back in October because we redid our bills. We just filed it, and there was no subsequent action. It wasn't on an admin or anything like that.
Yeah.
We've had our bill form reviewed. We updated it when we went to the AMI system.
Okay.
So all of the information on the bill has been blessed by OER.
Thank you. So I think not addressing the substance of what you said at all. I think I'm trying to figure out what the next step would be, because it sounds like the opportunity to revise or comment on the structure and format of the bills, which are all different, maybe when the filing is made to the commission. So I'm not quite sure what the next step is here.
Now, maybe as the only thing, and BG&E brought up, there is no gas price comparison on BG&E bills.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when you're shopping, there's no PSC website. There's only one place to find online any prices to compare gas to. So that one, I would love to work why when consumers look at their bill, it's really hard to figure out your gas price.
Sure, I appreciate that. So, that sounds almost like an enhancement that BGE could be discussed, on a one-off conversation. I'm also amenable to including it in whatever recommendation we come up with next steps on the website. But I think the takeaway is this is not something that has to go into regulations.
There is a Comar
regulation on what's required to be on every, at least electric utilities
Okay.
bill. So.
Okay.
Yes, I agree with what Mr. Mike Heel just said, and also the price to compare, if that's what's being suggested. On the electric side, there were commission orders that required that, and the language was developed, so it was a comprehensive thing versus a one-off
Okay.
thing with each utility to put the price to compare on the bill. So
So this is a commission proceeding that needs to be undertaken.
that's what was done for electricity, and I can't remember the case number, but there was a docket and stakeholder comment and working
Okay.
groups, I believe.
Okay.
And lastly, I don't know if this falls under regulations, but the supplier boxes that come in those feeds seem light on information. So I wondered if this work group would consider product pricing names and contract start and end dates so that consumers have more information each month about what they bought. And especially because right now there's very little information. It's just your kilowatts times a rate without a currency sign, which is interesting because a lot of people don't recognize it's a price. and there's just no information. So you if you haven't saved your contract plan summary, you don't know when your product is, you don't know when your fixed plan is going to stop.
So I'm not sure that that's a
I know.
supplier thing. I think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the utilities have to squeeze a lot on their bills. So getting like additional supplier information on a utility consolidated bill may just not be practically practicable. I know this suggestion is unpopular, but you know, to the extent that not yours. What I'm about to say.
Oh no,
I'm sorry. But to the extent that the commission does take up supplier consolidated billing, like I feel like we'd have a lot more input on what would go on a supplier's bill, because it's you know, it's their lines that
But
they're
I'm
filling
curious
up.
though, when you look at that supplier box, there's a lot of white space. It does seem like there is room for additional, a couple dates and a product pricing name, especially because the product pricing name I think should say variable rate or some consistent name across Maryland for month to month, or it could be month to month rates, whatever. At least that's on there, because that's one of the issues is you don't know it's variable because it doesn't say it's variable. You actually have to track each bill.
Yeah.
And look at it. So I would be curious to hear from the utilities if there is squeezable room in there just for some extremely basic consumer information. And maybe not now.
Sure.
Hi, this is Terry, Washington Gas. Couple things. One, we have a shadow rate for PGC on our invoices. Already, we display it. Washington Gas manages the budget, not the supplier, so we don't have that issue. As far as messages, we are very limited on what we have currently, and they already have space to put on a message. However, it's not a variable message. It's a set message across all of them. Okay, no free-form messages on our invoices.
Understood. Okay, Mr. Atkins and Mr. Wilson.
For PHI, we do allow suppliers 20 lines of data on the billing invoice in each row. For the line item detail contains 47 characters, so you can only squeeze but so much into that one line for the data. And we also do have 2 boxes for comments, but as you said, they're not. They're static messages, so everyone will see the same message, not like for this customer, this customer,
Right.
this customer's for everyone. So
Understood. Okay. I have a sense that that's kind of a common theme. Okay. So, I mean, we can think a little bit more about this, but it sounds like, you know, that we could have a whole separate work group on reviewing and modifying company bills, and that may be more than I can chew in the next, 45 days or so. But I really appreciate you bringing it to our attention and something to keep in mind. So, it's 4:30. We've, worked our way through these topics, but we've got one major homework assignment from today about the electronic customer account lookup tool, and we also have a second homework assignment for stakeholders to review, in particular the straw proposal put forward by OBC with respect to the website and budget billing addition. So those two things are going to be before us for the next work group meeting. Like I have to impress upon you, we're reaching the home stretch of this phase of the work group because I have a real deadline of the end of this year for filing this work group report. That's not a deadline for the end of this work group. We can recommend, additional materials. In fact, I think we will. But I have to file something in less than 60 days. So the next work group meeting date that I would like to suppose is reflective of that timeline, because I also would like to put together a report that you get to read. If not, you're welcome to comment on it. Whether or not I take your comments is another matter. But I feel like we've got to meet on the 28th of November. Oh wait, that's a retail gas public conference. Well, we can do it at 1. Is there a commitment that I'm just not thinking of on November 28th, beginning at 1? Thanksgiving's the prior Thursday, so this is Tuesday. This is Tuesday the 28th, following Thanksgiving.
I think it's PC49.
Yeah, it's at 10 a.m. So I was thinking 1 p.m. Some of you may be here. That may just be a long day for you at the commission. Thoughts on that date? Again, we'll write out the homework assignments and circulate them in short order. I have a sinking feeling, based on a comment earlier, that developing this cost estimate for my electronic customer account lookup tool, you may come back and tell me is not doable in 26 days. So let's have some offline conversations about that. We've got to take a step forward on that piece somehow. So are there any questions about next steps? Okay. You're 3 minutes late, but I've been early other times, so I'm going to beg your forgiveness. All right, thanks everyone.